Welcome, sinners and heathens. Episode 28 of Heavy Metallurgy is back, and with my esteemed cohort, Alan, as
Hello.
always, my intrepid co-host, and the exalted, wonderful Pat from Ground Zero Salem. Thank you for
I'm exalted
jumping
as
in a
fucking
pinch.
up in here. Also have trouble speaking. Hi, I'm Pat, Ground Zero Salem. Decided to keep it.
And folks,
what's up?
Everybody's links to their channels is in the description. So if you're not a subscriber to Let's Talk Metal or Ground Zero Salem, please do so. They're awesome dudes, and their channels need way more subscribers. And
Hit that bell.
I just inhaled tobacco juice. Hold on.
You're on the snooze again. That's right.
I am. I haven't been all week until today, but whatever.
Not judging.
We wanted to go easy today because we kind of dilly-dallied this week, didn't we, Alan?
It's been a very busy week for everybody. So, yeah,
it
took a little while for an idea to come together.
Yep. And we decided to go with a year to talk about our favorite releases from that year, or stuff we were listening to a lot. Not necessarily maybe favorites, but stuff that was in pretty good rotation during the time. Mm-hmm. And we chose Y2K, the year 2000, when the world was supposed to end. All computers were going to crash and the internet would be no more. But guess what? Didn't happen. They're going to have to try again. Cosmos.
God
can't finish us off. We need our internet porn and eBay and Discogs.
Yeah, they almost turned off Napster and eBay in 2000. The world was trembling.
Yes. So, Pat, what were you doing in 2000? You remember that far back? What'd you say? I'm sorry. There's a little lag.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I said the world didn't end, or did it? I think it's all simulation. Yeah, I do remember 2000 really well, which is weird because I was living in Boston the first time. I moved to Maine and then Syracuse and then back to Boston. But I was living in Boston. I was 21 years old. I was singing in a Crust band that was kind of incorporating a lot more metal elements. And our drummer and guitarist were like really, really into what was going on in death metal at the time. And it kind of got me back into it. So I have some selections from this pile that remind me a lot of that. There was a lot of trips to the Worcester Palladium when they had like a lot of pretty solid metal gigs. There was a lot of seeing Incantation and Immolation and Nile and that sort of stuff. And the band that I played in was more of like a basement show, Legion Hall kind of band, but we definitely had a lot of like black and death metal influence, albeit did not have the talent to pull a lot of that influence off. Fun band, but yeah, so that's where I was at. I was definitely drunk a lot. So the fact that I can recall any of that is pretty impressive. I lived above UMass hockey players who kept me up all night long and completely destroyed their apartment. So that was cool. That's about all I remember right now.
How about you, Alan?
Let's see. 2000. If anybody, tell me if anyone's heard this one before. I had just moved to the Raleigh, North Carolina area.
Heyo.
But yeah, I moved to the Raleigh area in fall '99 and had just started working on my doctorate at NC State. So yeah, I was sort of, back in the school zone. Raleigh was kind of cool. There was a better chance of seeing shows there, although not a ton of stuff was coming through the area at that time. Raleigh, Durham, Chapel had a good history for, live music and heavy bands, but there's a little bit of a lull there. There was only one or two places that were really pulling in any heavy acts. But so yeah, 2000 got to see Deceased for the first time. I had been sort of online buddies with King Fowley and Mike Smith for years before that. And they came and played Raleigh in January, I think it was that year. So I got to check them out. There was a really gnarly record store there close to campus called School Kids Records, which I think is still there. And they had a guy named Daniel working behind the counter who was really good at bringing in all of the latest, real heavy metal titles. anything that got a positive review in Metal Maniacs, he would have it on the shelf, within a week or two of the latest issue coming out. So, he's bringing a lot of European black metal stuff, obviously, any, headliner in death metal. So it was a really good time to, get caught up on all of that stuff. The past couple of years, I'd spent a lot more time picking up older 80s material. So it was a really good chance to kind of get back on some of the newer releases. They did a good job bringing in a lot of cool t-shirts and stuff like that too. So yeah, it was nice to have a record store that was releasing all the new stuff on campus. So I had stuff to listen to while studying nonstop and working in the labs and all that. So yeah, that was most of 2000 for me. What were you up to, Marty?
I was just coming off of doing a lot of writing and traveling for Metal Maniacs, doing a lot of shows, a lot of fests. Went out east, went to the Worcester Palladium and some place in Jersey and a bunch of other stuff. I might have quit Maniacs in 2000. Might have been, no, it was 2000, I think. But yeah, I was an influx of my life where I was single and I was getting a ton of new music to listen to. I was very much a seeker. I wanted to hear everything. Of course, back then it was impossible. It's even worse now. Anybody that has that mindset is financially and utterly doomed. But yeah, I mean, as far as music and writing and stuff, it was a pretty creative time for me. A big transition in my life, going from married to not so married, and partying a lot, stuff like that. But yeah, I remember very fondly. I was very much a big Norwegian black metal fan, and the later 90s and the early 2000s was starting to become a very pivotal point for that genre in particular. Mm-hmm. It went from very influential, groundbreaking music to kind of transforming out of what it was into something new. A lot of bands were either going more of a turbocharged, technical, really clean sounding death metal band, or weirdly electronic, kind of leaving behind their roots. In a lot of ways it lost me. I don't know. I just was I was listening to a lot more non-black and death metal bands, not a lot, but some, reconnecting with my heavy metal roots a bit more, listening to some other stuff like ISIS and shit like that, Cave In, Botch, Dillinger. I mean, bands that I had seen.
Botch, cool.
Yeah, seen a lot. That was kind of their heyday, I guess. And I was, being kind of involved with some of the Relapse dudes. I was at shows and introduced to a lot of those bands and saw a lot of that. So it was kind of influential. It snuck in there. In fact, infected my hardcore band a little bit. And yeah, it's kind of a short-lived stint for me in that stuff. But yeah, that's basically what I was up to at that time. But
good deal. Something that's, I think, worth mentioning about Y2K. Yeah, it's a total joke now. At the time, everybody was very up in the air about how it was going to affect computer systems.
Yeah.
The one computer system that actually did get fried by Y2K and was down forever afterwards was the message board at Metal Maniacs.
Yeah, and Lapland too, wasn't it? I can't remember.
Actually, well, with the Metal Maniacs forum going down, and I mean, it was down. It was not coming back anytime soon. One of the members started up a kind of parallel site called Lapland Metal.
That's right. Yep.
And to kind of let people migrate to that, and it was really just meant to be like a stopgap until the Maniacs page got put back together. But yeah, that ended up taking, I don't know, months and months. That whole thing, it crashed, burned, and the ashes were scattered, across, the solar system before they could reassemble that thing. And so, yeah, in the meantime, Lapland Metal ended up becoming a really vibrant forum. And the Metal Maniacs forum never really recovered as a major gathering point for metalheads. They got it back up and running eventually, but a lot of people from Lapland Metal did not migrate back to Metal Maniacs at that point. And the Metal Maniacs forum became sort of a troll haven pretty
overrun by
rapidly.
ads. Yeah.
It will just, ads, but also just a lot of people wanting to post, really, asshole kind of stuff. They were there very much to just, pick on people, post trash. It wasn't a serious place for a lot of metal discussion anymore. It was really hard to cut through all the crap on Metal Maniacs once they got it back up.
It's kind of what happened with the Relapse forum too. That kind of became where all the trolls went and took refuge and basically slammed on each other.
I think that happened with every forum.
Yeah, a lot of you're exactly right, Pat. It does. Forums do tend to go through that kind of arc.
Well, they're gone now. I mean, there still are some, but I mean, it's all kind of moved over onto social media. But like, I was on the Nuclear War Now forum a lot from like 2007 till 2014 or 15, probably, and like it just got to be. Well, all the Nazis on there, not to get into that again, but like, just assholes in general, really. The same thing on the hardcore side of things with the Bridge 9 forum, it's just ridiculous. But real quick, Y2K for me, like New Year's Eve, I was hanging out at a punk house and I didn't want to go into the streets of Boston. I was like, I don't know what's going to, because I'm a naturally kind of paranoid sort of person, cautious. I err on the side of caution generally. I always assume the worst is going to happen. It's like, I don't want to go into the streets of Boston. The girl I was hanging out with was like, come on, come with me. And I was like, okay. But like all of my friends all bought like gas masks and like padding and like riot gear. Like everybody looked like a Sodom record or something. And all these punk rock kids, spiky mohawks and stuff. And like, I mean, it was New Year's Eve 2000. So I was like blind drunk and we all just, I got coerced into it and we all just ran the streets, just like yelling, being like, oh, and I guess back at the house when the ball dropped, my friend Steve was in the basement and threw the breakers. So that all the electricity went off in the house and everybody freaked out. Pretty funny, but yeah, we ran around like screaming, freaking out, like knocking over trash cans or whatever punk rock kids do. And like, I don't remember it very well, obviously, but everybody was wearing gas masks and stuff. So that was a good time.
Yep. But through it all, we kept jamming the music, and we each have a stack of stuff to discuss tonight that were hot hitters during that era. And Pat, we might as well just start this shindig off with some stuff you've been spinning back in the day.
Oh, back then in 2K. Okay. Well, I remember when this came out, and this was a big deal. Napalm Death, Enemy of the Music Business.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them right after this. I don't know if it was in 2000 or 2001 at the Palladium. This was their big return to form record when they came back to playing grind. They were listening to a lot of Nazem, I guess. Nazem was their muse for going back to their old style. And that was the first time I saw them, was on this tour. And what a way to bring it back, blasty, back to right where they left off with Utopia Banished, pretty much. Like better production than that record maybe, but same style. Really good.
I haven't listened to that since it came out. Easy.
It's great. Order of the Leech is really good too.
Right on. Alan.
All right. I'm just going to go ahead and get this one out of the way. One of the big heavy metal stories of 2000 was the reunion of Bruce Dickinson with Iron Maiden, which resulted in this album, Brave New World. The band had split up early in the 90s after Fear of the Dark. Bruce Dickinson had made some absolutely horrible solo albums and then made some absolutely really good solo albums. It took him a little while to find his groove. I guess he tried out some different things. Yeah, Iron Maiden in the meantime most people considered them to be misfiring a lot. Personally, I didn't mind the X Factor. I thought that was a fairly cool album, if a little bit different from their normal stuff. But Virtual 11 was a total miss for me. That was not an album I enjoyed at all. I thought the band seemed very confused. They didn't seem to have a direction. Just nothing about that album came together. And by the end of that period, everyone was pretty much in agreement that Blaze was just not the right guy to be trying to lead that band. And then, lo and behold, the stars lined back up, and the band got back together. I remember being very skeptical about how that was going to go. I tend to be pretty skeptical about reunion projects in the first place, but this one clicked very well. People instantly loved the album. It had a lot of very catchy, very memorable songs on it. Some of them are maybe a bit too repetitive, some may be a bit too long, but overall, yeah, it really put the band back on the map and got them headed back in the right direction. And I think for a lot of folks, it's still their favorite Iron Maiden album of the reunion era. They've done several now, but a lot of folks still point back to this one as their favorite. And yeah, really cool album that you got a big band back on the rails after you kind of wandering adrift for a little bit.
It really, I was quite, when I heard, what was it? The Wicker Man was the song they released off that first, I believe.
Yep, that was the lead single. Yep.
Pretty simple radio hit, but it had the Maiden magic to it, I thought. And I was very excited about Bruce coming back for sure. But Ghost of the Navigator, Blood Brothers, Dream of Mirrors. I mean, there's some really, really great songs on here. It's probably the best of the 2000s.
Yep.
The best of the 2000s, easily, which, I mean, I like Dance of Death quite a bit. I like The Matter of Life and Death pretty well, a little long. That's when they started to get a little long, but this is a really solid return to form for Maiden, for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I didn't pick it up right away. Again, I was a little worried about how it was going to come together, but yeah, once I heard it, I was like, oh, okay, nothing to worry about. All is right with the world here. Yep. So, Marty, what is your first pick to show off tonight?
Well, I'm going to go with probably the least metal of the bunch here, even though it has elements of that. And I am not a Sleep fan. I think that is a band that's incredibly overrated. But when High on Fire started, holy shit. This album to me is the best thing Matt Pike ever laid riffs and sang to. This thing is a juggernaut of riffs. It is just like it's metal, but it's sludge. It's got stoner in it. It's just a bludgeoning bulldozer of riffs. The songs flow. There's just like this pulsing crush of guitars in it. I don't know. This is an album I continue to go back to, and I never really cared. I like the album after this, okay, but he started to get a lot more metal on that stuff. But this album here is just a perfect mix of sludge and with metal tinges, and it's just a pummeling album. I really, really, really enjoy the crap out of this thing. And again, the best thing Pike ever did. And I still don't understand why people are so in love with Sleep. I like some of their stuff. I like the occasional riff here and there, the occasional song, but God, overrated band, man. In my hot take, maybe, but
I could see it like that. Dope Smoker, I don't really understand. I don't have the attention span for Dope Smoker. Holy Mountain, I love the self-titled one that's like more of a sludge record. And it's funny that you bring up Art of Self-Defense because I still haven't heard that, but I love Surrounded by Thieves. So
this is way.
I like the guy's riffs.
Yeah, it's really, like I said, the songs just kind of flow and they have a pulse to them, but it's not like a sleep drone. It's just there's more flow and structure to the songs. Like Dope Smoker, everybody talks about Rants Radios with Dope Smoker. When I got a promo for that, the original release of that was on London Records, I think, and it was then called Jerusalem. And my copy of that is Jerusalem, and it's just boring, man. It's just like a drone for the whole thing, and it's a good sound, but maybe it's Sun before Sun happened. I guess it's very much of that mindset, I guess, with a little bit more weed involved. But
yeah, it's a bridge too far for me for that record, whatever you want to call it. I do really like Holy Mountain, though.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Sleep, I've checked stuff that there's out from time to time here and there, and it's never awful, but it never interests me enough that I want to really dig into the band and explore them. So like, okay, that's what they sound like, fair enough, but I move on and listen to other stuff instead.
The Sleep's Holy Mountain, I really like the song Dragnaut. I believe the intro song on the album. Is that what it's called? That's a great song, but the rest of it just kind of falls into sameness, and the songs just don't feel. It's more about the sound than it was the songs to me. But I don't know. I mean, people dig that album, and I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I see it. It can appeal to a certain demographic for sure. But yeah, they're one of those bands I've got a handful of their albums and passing interest in. But he got it right on this first High on Fire. Definitely check it out, Pat. It's great. It's a great album.
I've been meaning to, because a couple of albums after that are great. I got those because they came out on Relapse or whatever when back in the day. So
yeah,
I think they reissued this too, but this is a Man's Ruin issue. Yeah, Man's Ruin 2000.
Yeah. Another one that came out that year that is, I kind of put in that same boat, and it may not be fair because I don't listen to them a lot, but Electric Wizard's Dope Throne, another one that people really get into. But to me, it's got kind of a cool sound, but song wise, I can't. I don't have the attention to sit there and try to listen to it very much.
I didn't appreciate that one until way later. I remember listening to it a couple years after it came out and just being like, nah, dog. But I mean, out of all that stuff, I'd rather listen to Cathedral than any of those bands. But that's because that band imprinted on me when I was like 14. So, that's a big component of it is nostalgia.
The Cathedral thing, and we've talked about it before. Dorian's vocals are a love or hate deal, and it depends on my mood, but I typically am not in the mood for it. I like the Soul Sacrifice.
It's tough.
The album with, I can't remember, it's like a purple cover. O'Malley did the cover artwork. Looks like a peacock on it. I can't remember the name of it.
Time.
That's a great record. That's their best record as far as the ones I've heard is crushing. Good album. But
yeah, I'm a big Forest guy, and I couldn't get into anything past Soul Sacrifice for a while, and then for some reason they clicked with me last year where I was like, I don't care if the vocals suck. I like the sucky vocals. Suck more, Lee Dorian. This is great.
Keep on sucking.
I don't know exactly why.
Yep.
That dude Grimtooth that's friends with Ben that does that really cool tape distro through Instagram referred to that like Midnight Mountain era Cathedral as butt doom, and now I can't think of Cathedral as anything but butt doom. That's so good. That's the best made up subgenre ever.
Right?
That's good. Yeah, I like the first couple of Cathedral albums. It's just a band I didn't dislike later stuff. I just lost track of them over time.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well,
Mr. Pat,
my turn.
Yes,
all
sir.
right. So this is a big deal. If you were into DIY punk, you can probably hear my dog barking. She's stoked on Tragedy. This is the self-titled Tragedy record. Are either of you gentlemen familiar with this?
I am not, but I think somebody already mentioned it in the chat. So
Someone did
other
mention
folks
in
out
the
there
chat.
are.
Yeah. So Tragedy was the band that evolved out of His Hero Is Gone. His Hero Is Gone were, for lack of a better term, like kind of a crust band that was around in the 1990s, but they were very talented songwriters, had great production, super impactful writing. We're taking a lot from the first wave of stench and crustcore from the UK, a lot of stuff from bands like Amoebics, very early Neurosis, like the first two Neurosis records, and wrote very short, concise, but like monolithically heavy songs. Tragedy kind of was a couple of guys from that band that are brothers, the Burdett brothers, and kind of took it in more of a motor charged, for lack of a better term, kind of getting tired of hearing that, but like kind of a Motorhead discharge kind of bent, but just as heavy, drawing a lot of influence from the melodies utilized by a lot of Japanese hardcore bands like the Blazing Spirits bands. And just, they had a pro gear, pro tude kind of thing within a DIY context. They played pretty big shows to a lot, like hundreds and hundreds of people, but it was always like, 5 to 10 door price kind of thing. Weren't above playing basements if they could get enough people in them, that sort of deal. They were really good. They sounded great. And they killed it all throughout up until like maybe the mid or 2010-ish. They kind of started to slow down. They never really called it a day. They put out a record a couple of years ago, but they were very, very, very good. Simultaneously heavy and anthemic, awesome band. Influenced a lot of stuff, like ranging from the more like metal side of things into like a lot of the clean cut, like khaki shorts kind of hardcore going on in the 2000s as well. They kind of were a game changer in hardcore in general. So this was the beginning of it. Really fucking great band.
Would you compare them to the oh my god, I'm drawing a blank. The guy's name, the main guy in the band, Drid. Is that his name? What's his band?
Dwid. Integrity.
Is it kind of an Integrity adjacent type of style, or
kind of? Both bands like came from very, very different ends of the spectrum as far as hardcore goes, but had some of the same influences, like namely a lot of Japanese hardcore. Dwid came out of that sort of like Youth Crew and kind of like New York hardcore, Cro-Mags, Judge influence kind of thing, but with like way more metal. And Tragedy were coming from the crusty side of things, but you know, both appreciated the hell out of like Gizm, you know, and that Japanese stuff. So they definitely had a lot of mutual fans and certainly played a lot of like bigger fests together. Like I think they both played Chaos and Teos, for example. I certainly can see the parallels between the two. I'm a big fan of both bands.
Okay. Alan.
Okay. Marty mentioned that black metal was doing some odd things around this time frame of the late 90s and moving into the early 2000s, and one that definitely would fit the bill and was a hugely anticipated release that year. And I don't have a physical copy, so I got to go to the film here. But we had Mayhem with Grand Declaration.
That was my next one, you bastard.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, these were, this was, kind of the return of course, a legendary band. They'd done the Wolfslayer Abyss EP, but it was just a few songs, and folks didn't really know what direction they were going to go in. And true to form for any band that's going to be a leader in a genre, they carved a brand new path for themselves. Grand Declaration, it doesn't really sound like what they had done before. The very last song on Wolfslayer Abyss is kind of similar to it. It's a little bit of like an introduction to this style, and it was a highly anticipated album. It was a very very talked about album that year. Some people really didn't. Some people warmed up to it, but it took a while to get used to the sound. And yeah, it was Mayhem, sort of helping lead the way for black metal to go in different directions, that it wasn't all going to be, cult, necro forever. That, yeah, it had a much, bigger, broader, ambitious sound with, lots of different weird elements. You really get into, the more weird kind of black metal by this point, for sure. I remember, for whatever reason, it was a hard album to get in Raleigh. The local stores could not get copies of it, and they eventually ended up getting a vinyl copy. And I was just like, sure, I'll buy that. So I ended up getting the thing on vinyl, which nothing got released on vinyl around that time. Vinyl couldn't have been more dead. I don't know why or how it even got pressed on vinyl. But yeah, I remember just sitting in, it actually was one of those albums I played it once or twice, like, this is interesting. But it quickly became an album I would just sit down and actually plug headphones into my turntable and sit and listen to it that way, to really try to focus on it, which is not something I usually do with the turntable. I rarely use headphones with the turntable. But this one, I got like a super long headphone extension cord, so I could plug it into the turntable, run the cord out to the front porch of the little second-story apartment I had, and would just sit out there on the porch at night after dark listening to this Mayhem album. And 30 minutes later, get up, flip it over to side 2 and listen to the second half of it, just sitting there in the dark, listening to it through the headphones to try to get it. I thought it was a really cool album. Very different, very challenging for that time, but I thought they did a really nice job on it.
For me, that album, I hated it. This to me was kind of how the Norwegian scene was splintering into different directions, and this was a prime. These are the godfathers of the genre.
Yep.
And they took it in a very odd martial industrial direction. A lot of different weird styles are creeping in here.
Yep.
It is only until the last 10 years that it clicked finally, after long debates and arguing with friends about this album who loved it. Jeff Wagner and Zoller, if you're watching, you guys are the ones. You made me stick to it, and I'm glad I did, because now This and Ordo Ad Chaos are the only two I really grabbed for. I haven't even heard the latest couple Mayhem albums. I hear they're good, but I haven't jumped back into that yet. But this is just something now that seems to work. Back then, I wasn't feeling it. I didn't want anything to do with this. And Maniac's vocals were the bone of contention for me then. I always preferred Attila, even over Dead. I thought Dead was good, but it was just a little too unhinged. And I kind of relate him to the era of Mayhem that they didn't really sound like they found themselves yet as far as songwriters go. But this nowadays, this thing is it's really impressive what they did. They had the balls to try something really weird and out there. You could tell Blasphemer took the reins of this band. Him and Hellhammer. This is very much them, at the helm of this. The super clean triggers. They're going for that Marshall Industrial. And it worked. A big high concept album that was ahead of its time. Like I said, it hits me in the right spot now. Then, no, I was not feeling it then for sure.
Oh yeah, there for everybody that liked that album when it came out, there was somebody else that did not like that album.
Yep.
I think it was on that tour. I saw them at the Palladium, and there was all this talk of like, is it really even Mayhem with like the personnel that they have and blah blah blah. I just remember the singer had like the Blade Runner stripe across his eyes, and I was like, that's a weird choice. Yeah.
Yep, it was definitely weird times for sure.
Everybody in Norway said it looked cool.
Yeah.
It did kind of look cool. It's just something I wasn't expecting.
Yep. And then they had to kind of follow with being extreme, cutting himself on stage, whether he wanted to or not. It became part of the stage show, not necessarily, I don't know, but a true feeling of expression. It was like, okay, I'm going to cut myself now, or I'm going to wrap my arm in barbed wire and stab the pig head, and I don't know. Musical theater.
It's the same era of like backyard wrestling, just that era of like, let's see.
That's actually worth pointing out, Pat, that this was pro wrestling, both WCW, WWE, ECW. This was prime era. This was the attitude era for pro wrestling, and there were crossovers musically, with heavy music and what was going on with that boom, the huge pop culture boom with the pro wrestling scene.
Yep, I remember. I think it was right around the same time. It was maybe it was like a couple years before, but whatever. There was like the Undertaker's whole gimmick was he had like a whole like cult legion that was like crucifying people and stuff like that. I was like, this is pretty Norwegian right here. What Taker's doing. So
yep.
Yeah.
But you definitely you saw a lot of heavy music, crossover into wrestling, and it worked for both of them. It kind of elevated both visibly. It was a big time for that.
For sure, especially ECW.
ACW is awesome.
Someone said interestingly, they released a remastered version with overhauled drum sounds, and it doesn't have the same vibe at all. I've heard people say it sounds a lot better, but I don't know. I haven't heard it. It kind of seems like it defeats the point of the original mix, but I don't know. You guys heard it?
I have not.
I haven't heard the original.
Is it the version that's got the new cover art also?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of disappointed they changed the cover art, but what you want to do?
Yep. All right. First of all, 56 people watching. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Wow.
It means a lot. Very cool. Thank you for hanging out with us on a Friday night. My first death metal poll here is probably my favorite death metal album from the 2000s. And that would be The Chasms, Procession to the Infraworld.
You beat me to it.
This album is probably my favorite Chasm album. The band was completely on fire. I've seen this band with this lineup probably 4 or 5 times between this and the years that followed it. One of the best live bands ever. This band, you cut their veins and it bled mercury. These guys were metal to the core. They played it up live. They were just, synchronized head banging. You had the Daniel had the skull that hung from the microphone, and just all this really cool aesthetics, the spikes, the bullet belts. And this is, at this point, the band was living in Chicago. And they sounded nothing like an American death metal band, which is funny because Daniel at this time was leading up the, he had just left doing a tenure with, a lengthy tenure with Incantation. He sang on my favorite Incantation album, Diabolical Conquest. Saw them live with Daniel a bunch of times. And this album, it sounds Mexican. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just a unique Aztec flair to this stuff. It's unintentional. It's just where they came from. It's very evident. Even though they were in the U.S., they were not influenced by what was going on around them. I mean, all those years of playing those Incantation riffs did not sway Daniel's writing and his vision for this band. He was the main songwriter. Him and Antonio, the drummer, have been the two duo members in this band since the very beginning. It still are. And there's a lot of great death metal. There's a lot of great Chasm albums, but this Procession of the Infraworld, really heavy drum sound, probably their best produced album from this era. Really great songwriting. Daniel sounds evil as shit. The songs are very evil, very malevolent sounding riffs, but they never lost the true spirit of metal in their songwriting, which really gives this a really unique flair. Very awesome album. If you have not heard Procession to the Infraworld, check out The Chasm. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's a great pick, Marty. That was a band that, there had been a real buzz about, but their first few albums were really hard to get a hold of. Even in tape trading or CDR trading circles, people just weren't able to get them much. This was the first album that was kind of a little more available. It was the first one I found, in the store. And I remember just being like, holy crap, there's a Chasm album. That, just grabbed it instantly because I'd been hearing so many good things about the band and wanted to check them out. And they're one of those bands, I don't think they ever made a bad album, really.
No.
The first couple are, more raw, of course, as the band finds their footing. But even those albums, are pretty cool. I think there's one of the later ones that I never got around to hearing. But, they always had, really consistent, really high-quality releases. Really
Their
cool
latest
band.
is Instrumental, which I'm bummed about. The album came before it. Daniel dialed his vocals way back in the mix because I think he told me this was sick of screaming. I think he kind of blew out his vocals over the years. So I don't think he had the confidence that he used to have. So the album before the new one, he buried them in the mix. But the newest one with the instrumental is really, really good. It's just, I miss the vocals.
Yeah.
Simon says, and it's melodic as fuck. Yeah. I mean, that's their true metal, cred coming through. I remember I went out. This is a little story time here. I went out to Relapse when they first moved to Upper Darby in Philly. They went down there, flew down there, and they took me to a fest. It might have been the November to Dismember Fest in Jersey. It was. There were two vans, and they decided to leave. One van left, and the other van thought, oh, they got Marty. So they left too. So basically stranding me at the fest. And Daniel's like, what's wrong, brother? I'm like, this fucking guy's at Relapse ditched me at the fest. He's like, oh, those dipshits. I will take you to your hotel. I'm like, I don't know which hotel they're staying at. We will find it, brother. And I got in the van. It was the Chasm. The van started up there. It was a Man of War album. And each one of them was playing their respective instrument, air guitar style. Antonio was back there playing drums, and Julio is air guitar, and Daniel's headbanging and air guitar and screaming along with the vocals, driving with his knee. Like, holy shit, I'm gonna die in this Astro van. But, I mean, super. Again, I've known Daniel. I haven't talked to him. I've fallen out of touch with him, but back then we talked quite a bit. He was a super nice dude, and cheers to that band, man. They keep flying the torch for this style of music, and that's to be commended for sure.
That's rad. Similar thing happened to me in Worcester. After I moved from Boston to Maine the following year, which was 2001, I think, me and my friend Tom went down to Worcester from Lewiston, Maine to see Motorhead, Morbid Angel, and Today Is the Day. And
I saw that tour too.
It was cool. It was a good gig.
Yeah.
It was a good gig. It was the first time I saw Motorhead. And we got stranded. It was like
Only
late
time.
November. It's pretty cold. Same deal happened to me. One car was going to Boston. Another car was going to Boston. Tom was talking to one party of people. I was talking to the other. We both thought the other got a ride. We're, long story long, we're walking around Worcester at like almost midnight. Not a good scene if you've ever been to Worcester.
No.
And we're trying to get, ended up getting a hotel room, no big deal. But we went. Tom was a retired train hopper, so he was all about trying to get scam his way into this and that, and ask people. We go to the little shitty convenience store behind the Palladium, and we see Trey Azagthoth, and Tom's just like, "Hey man, you guys going to Boston? You think we can get a ride with you?" And Trey was like, "No, we're going to Canada, but here, have some guitar picks." So we got some, I wish I still had my Morbid Angel guitar pick that Trey Azagthoth gave me.
That's when Jared Anderson was from the band.
Yeah,
when they played Royal Oak, Jared Anderson
were good. Like I hadn't thought about them in a while. I was just like play Chapel of Ghouls. But it was funny. It was like great. Like at least I get to say I met Trey Azagthoth. I didn't get a chance to ask him about Sailor Moon, but what are you gonna do?
He probably would have took you to Canada with him as his roadie.
Yeah, dude, I love Project Aco. Anyway, is it my turn? I can't remember.
It is
your
turn.
turn. You're up, Pat.
All right. So fair enough. Like try to make a clumsy segue here. Talk about the Incantation record that came out that year.
Mm-hmm.
The Infernal Storm. After Daniel left, this is a pretty solid record. I saw them around this time. I don't know if they were touring on this or right before it or whatever. Like I said, those 2 years are kind of a blur, but it's a solid Incantation record. It's not like a huge departure or anything like that. They're a three-piece, four-piece. They're a four-piece on this.
Yeah, Mike Sayers.
Who took over. Death Rune, yeah, who great. I think Yonkers, death metal band. Played on all their demos and stuff. Like he does a great job. Dave Coolross was like the session drummer who played drums in more Malevolent Creation for a long time and a bunch of kind of more brutal bands. I think Gorgasm and stuff. It's a little bit more streamlined. Like it has all those token incantationisms, like with the squealies and like the kind of dirgy parts, but it's a little bit more on the peppy and almost like, I don't want to say catchy, but like it's not as murky sounding as
good production.
Like some of their earlier work. It seems like pretty focused and stuff. It's a good record.
I agree. 100%. Good stuff. Alan.
All right. So next up was another big name band. This may have come out right at the tail end of '99. So I may be off by just a month or two on this one. I can't quite remember, and I forgot to check. But this was a band that had made a big splash with their early work and their debut album, and then had kind of wandered around sonically for a while. People had gotten kind of a little bit turned off by some of the stuff they were trying, and this was a big return to form for them. They've kind of stayed in their lane ever since. It's My Dying Brides, Light at the End of the World. And again, this may be the tail end of like fall or winter of '99 before it rolled over to 2000. But yeah, before this, you'd had, The Angel in the Dark River. They cleaned up their sound a lot. You had albums like Gods of the Sun, which I like, but a lot of people do not care for. And then you'd had that, whatever it is, 34.789 times the square root of 2 divided by I% complete album that people just didn't know what the heck to make of. So it was a band that really seemed to be quickly fading out of people, falling off of people's radar. And then they came back with this album, and they got right back to basics of making very heavy, very mournful, melancholic, romantic kind of, Gothic flavored doom, and it hit exactly the right button. It got them, back on track. The album had a good reception to it. And it has a strong set of songs. This is one I will still go back and listen to. It's I think it's one of the stronger ones in their catalog. It's got a lot of really good tracks that have held up over the years. And yeah, after this, My Dying Bride, I guess they got it out of their system, or they learned their lesson or something, because they never really did any of that, more adventurous, off the wall stuff again. Ever since then, they've been a pretty consistent band. Members have come and gone. Elements of their sound have changed a little bit, but you definitely know what you're getting with any My Dying Bride album from the past 20 years.
Yeah, all that mid-period stuff I need to really investigate, because I love their early material, everything up to The Angel in the Dark River, and then it's like until like their more recent stuff for me. So that stuff I don't know at all. Even their like them and Paradise Lost, even their weird departure records, like I've read about them. I know about their like whatever synthy influences and stuff. Like I like that stuff too. So I should at least explore it. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, you can't listen to everything, and it's hard to. My Dying Bride's one I've almost always will pick up a new album by then. I've missed one or two here or there, but it's been a long time since they made a great album, but they always make good albums. So yeah, they're always worth checking out, but they're rarely going to make the best of the year kind of list. But it's always like, yeah, okay, another cool My Dying Bride album. I can dig that.
Right on. I gotta pee. Be right back.
Go pay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, for me, I'm probably going to be shitting in Alan's cereal bowl here a little bit. Maybe not.
I know what you're going to show.
Do you?
Oh, hold on. I'll have it. We'll see. All right, go ahead. Oh, well, no, okay. We're cool. We're cool.
Symphony X is the new Mythology suite.
That's
Is this their best album? It isn't, but it's solid prog power metal, traditional metal. Leading the charge of this band is a guitarist, a gunslinger called Michelangelo. He is a shredder, but one good thing about his shredding is it's memorable. It isn't just blind wankery. The guy knows what he's doing, but he compiles it. He puts it all into really super memorable, well-written riffs, and that translates into really well-written songs. Good, strong power singer on this. Great production. I mean, which has to be with this type of music, it has to be top of the line production, or it's just gonna sound wrong. But I listened to this quite a bit. It's one I got back when it came out as a promo. Ended up getting it in a used bin somewhere, and spent time with it as a promo, but spent a lot more time with it as the years went on, as my taste kind of gravitate back towards traditional metal. But this is a great band. I really haven't heard an album by this band that's been crap. There's been some that are better than others. Like this isn't one of my favorites. I think Iconoclast is my favorite by them, but great album, great band. If you're into proggy, traditional power metal, this is certainly should be in your collection for sure. They've got a ton of albums. All of them are really good. Check them out.
Yeah, they're a band that's been around for a long time, and yeah, again, has a pretty consistent catalog. They're those bands. They're another one that I like all their albums, but I rarely find one that I love by them. They've had a couple that were better than others, and yeah, really solid U.S. power metal band. Russell Allen's got a great voice. He sounds good, like you said. Michael's a real hotshot guitarist who knows his stuff. So yeah, they always do consistently good stuff. There were times I just felt like, there's always just maybe sometimes a little something missing, or this album's good, but the production's a little bit off, or this album, some of the songs don't quite stick. Always a good band. It just never quite made it to that top tier for me personally. But they've got a long legacy. They deserve. They've made a good name for themselves.
They should be bigger. Really,
they kind of should. Yeah, I always felt like they should have been. And I always felt like some of these albums should be just a little bit better than they are, which is being a little bit of a jerk, because they're good albums to start with, but they just never quite had that big monster album that could really put them over the top in a ton of people's eyes.
Was it the Ulysses album, Odyssey album? That's a really good one.
Odyssey's pretty good. The one I would liked a lot was Twilight in Olympus, if I remember. Yeah, which was a little earlier than those. Really, really good album, but yeah, the band hadn't quite established themselves, didn't quite have an audience yet. So that one was a little maybe ahead of its time. Was there one called Paradise Lost?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that one I think was like the closest they came to really starting to become like, a top tier echelon power metal band. That one got a lot of praise from a lot of folks.
With their prog influences, I don't see why like bands like Fate's Warning tend to get. Though I think Fate's Warning benefited from having a strong fan base from their first 4 albums that carried them a long ways. Because that band got really mellow. I mean, they really laid on the prog side of metal, or the mellow side of prog.
Yeah,
whereas
they did.
Symphony X, they stayed true, straight up metal and technical, but not too technical. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah, Fate's Warning made an album in 2000. We might talk about in a little bit.
We might. We might.
But it's.
I wonder if that's the one I have that I stumbled across by mistake. It's like $3. I was like, all right. Yeah, I think I compared it to Dream Theater, and Jeff took issue with that. I'm like, dude, I don't know the difference between any of this shit, man. I like 3 chords and yelling.
Yeah.
I am a caveman.
Right on. Mr. PP Pants, you're up.
What did you pick next, Pat?
I figured I'd grab this one from the pile since I was just talking about seeing them during this time. The Motorhead record, We Are Motorhead from 2000. It's a Motorhead record. Do you like Motorhead? You do? You'll like this.
Mm-hmm.
I've been commenting on it lately, how it got, I think, past 1916, March or Die, Bastards, like that era of like early to mid 90s Motorhead. I feel like there was like a maybe 5, 6, 7 Motorhead templates, blueprints that Lemmy was like, yeah, right. This is going to be the boogie rock song. This is going to be the song that sounds like Bad to the Bone.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be the song that sounds like Ace of Spades. This is going to be the one that kind of sounds like the Ramones. Like he had like a certain type of thing that he did. And like, this is a good example of that. There's like one of each of all those kind of examples on this. Stay Out of Jail is a good one. I think that's kind of a rocker, if I remember right. The title track at the very end is like the ass kicker one. And this is the Ace of Spades kind of song. A really good cover of God Save the Queen. I love how Motorhead's covers are almost better than the originals most of the time. I was listening to March or Die, like when I was taking a shower earlier, and they were covering, they cover Catch Scratch Fever on that. I'm like, this is way better than the original, but I digress. Yeah, it's a solid Motorhead record. It's pretty good.
Get back to work.
What's up, Holly? Did they have a record in 2000? Lost Rocket?
I don't know.
Don't think so. Not that I remember.
Would we want to hear it if they did?
Let me see here.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's when they were out of commission. Edwin went like 90, 92, maybe 96. But otherwise, yeah, they had one in 91, and then it jumps to 2008. So no Lost Rocket in Y2K. Sorry.
I have been super into the Rocket lately, though.
Lost Rocket's pretty fun.
They're good. Good band.
I never understood how I missed their, which one was it? The 1991 album. Because it was really liked Annihilation Principle, Know Your Enemy. And I never heard or saw tell anything about the Nothing Sacred album. I mean, we're talking like a decade or more later before I knew that album existed. Don't know. Wacky. Am I supposed to be showing a record now?
Nope. Marty.
Oh, did we lose our captain? So. Oh, God. Now it's going to turn into Lord of the Flies.
Sorry. Kid invaded the stream here. Here we go. Who's up next? I'm confused now.
Let's see. Pat was showing me We Are Motorhead, which is a really good, really solid Motorhead album for sure.
I still have flashbacks from our Motorhead stream with Makecock.
That was a very fun stream, and we so should have taken Chris's advice and split that into 2 parts.
Yeah, I have PTSD from that stream.
We learned our lesson and had with King, and yeah, we split that shit up.
All right, Alan, you're up.
Okay. Well, here's the album I thought you were going to show, Marty, when you pulled your Parametal Reckoning. This was the band's 4th album, and they had a new vocalist, which always, don't know how that's going to go. But in this case, it worked out just fine and kind of took the band to another level. Nocturnal Rites, Afterlife.
That's a good album.
this is a really good album.
Yep.
The band, was on Century Media, so they had, visibility at this point. They had parted ways with Anders Zachrisson, who was a really good vocalist. I liked his style a lot. The first 3 albums they did with him are fantastic European power metal albums that never quite got the respect they deserved. They were a little hard to come by, and again, they were also released in those years where power metal was just starting to get back on the map. By 2000, Hammerfall had done their thing. Nightfall in Middle of Earth, had done its thing. So yeah, everybody was, very much back on the power metal, hype train by this point. And Nocturnal Rites turned in a really solid album. This one, it sheds a little bit of the traditional European power metal style. This is a little more modern sounding approach to power metal. They've got, some different tricks with the instrumentation and stuff. And just the focus of the songwriting feels a little bit less, sword and sorcery and brotherhood, fantasy kind of stuff. And it's a little more streetwise, a little more direct, and it works really, really good. The first half of this album in particular is just amazingly tight. Really solid. The band would go on to do a lot of albums after this, and I felt like they got kind of cookie cutter for a while. Again, not bad albums, but they're one of those bands that started churning out an album about once every 18 months, and I always felt like it's like, guys, just slow down, put a little more work into these, and come up with a really killer set of 10 songs instead of 5 great songs and 5 songs that just kind of fill out the second side. But yeah, Afterlife, was a real solid album. I was really glad to see them do well with it after the change in vocalist.
I have that on a promo copy that I listened to quite a bit when it came out, and since it's a promo sleeve, it's in a box that is not part of the collection, the main collection. So out of sight, out of mind. And I hear one little caveat here. Everybody go check out Chromium Dioxide's channel. He's got a contest up. He's only got 1 entry. So all of you YouTubers get with the program.
It is a great entry. Nobody's going to beat Jurgen's entry on that. So
no, Jurgen showed a bunch of shit that I was going to show, which pissed me off. So it's kind of like sent me back to the fucking dugout.
Yeah. But his portrait of Castillo, no one's beating it. Jurgen could just have showed up, burped, and shown that picture, and he'd win the contest. Yeah. So everybody should try, but you're not going to win. It's a done deal. Jurgen is first, and he's going to win.
Time to break the bottle of champagne over the new record room and make my first video to be a contest entry.
Yep. I've been thinking, there's a couple things I've been wanting to do. I just haven't had the ambition to get in front of the camera, I guess. All right, Pat.
The weekend is young. Well, speaking of Canada and Canadians, this is the Black Hand, Pulling Your Strings. This is a well-loved Partied On copy. I think I bought this at a Bull Moose Records in Maine. I don't know if you can see this. It's $350. It just says fine. I guess that's a condition. I don't know. This originally came out as a cassette demo in 2000. When this finally made it to vinyl, it might have been like 2001, but I'm going to count it anyway. This was, musically, it's kind of like a death thrash sort of thing. There was influenced a lot by a lot of the Swedish melodeath stuff. It was all crusty dudes playing it from bands like Ire, Born Dead Icons, a lot of Quebecois, I believe, Canadian guys. This was a pretty short-lived project. They did an album 2 years after this that I can't remember the name of. It was like Warmonger or something along those lines, I think. The cover art by Away, but I was disappointed by that full length because it was it was very, very kind of overproduced. And this is super raw but clear. Born Dead Icon guys. Yep. Raw but clear. And I saw these guys in a basement in Boston and they ripped my fucking head off. It was kind of the era of bands like Year of Our Lord and some other bands kind of coming from punk and hardcore and stuff like that, but kind of latching specifically onto the Gothenburg stuff. And as we all know, that went south real fucking quick. But this is an example. Maybe it's because it's like crusty dudes and not like clean cut dudes. I don't know if that makes a difference or something, but it's real like visceral and nasty and really hooky. It's a really, really great metal EP. And it's like they were around for a couple of years and then called it a day. But if you look at their discogs of like members, it's like a who's who of like Canadian crust and hardcore at the time. Notably, Born Dead icons, like I said, and Ire, Shit Fit, who were like a pretty big deal for like crust up there, and just doing like perfect like nasty dissection, slaughter the soul, that kind of stuff, but doing it very, very well. Austin actually mentioned that, I think, on a live stream that we did with him over a year ago, where I'll shoot the shit about hardcore and stuff. He's a big fan of that record, from what I remember.
All right, Alan.
Marty, did we skip you, or did I completely miss what you picked a moment ago?
No, I did Symphony X. Oh, no, you might skip me. That's all right. We're good.
Okay.
Don't matter.
We'll catch you as we come back around. Okay. Another one from 2000 that made a pretty big splash for this band and ended up spawning a lot of imitators in this style, which is not the most popular style of heavy metal for a lot of folks, I realize, but I think it's a pretty cool album. Nightwish Oceanborn. This is power metal going, in a much lighter vein. Really sort of playing up the whole femme fatale vocals. A sort of over the top. Wants to be kind of orchestral vibe to it. In terms of the heaviness, it's pretty simple and straightforward a lot of time. But I do like Tarja's vocals on it, and this was definitely the band at their most bombastic. They were really going for that kind of classical sound. And over subsequent albums, they toned that down. I think they realized that maybe they were getting a little too over the top with it, and then they sort of reeled it back in some. But between this album and the follow up a year or two later with Wishmaster, they really it really became a big deal in heavy circles. Again, it's a style that I realize a lot of folks kind of look at, it's almost like the glam metal of the early 2000s to a lot of people. It's like, well, it's kind of maybe technically heavy metal, but I don't know about that. But they did some fun albums. I do enjoy some of their stuff from this period for what it is. It is a shame that you had so many spin-off bands that didn't have the same talent level. Made a lot of generic music in this vein. And I never really there's a lot of them. And I felt Nightwish, once they parted ways with Tarja Turunen, I don't think they've made a really spectacular album since then. They've gone through a couple of vocalists. The new vocalist is very popular. She's got a good voice, but
her voice is pretty insane.
Yeah. But I just feel like it's a band now that you try to listen to their songs or watch one of their videos, and they're almost parodying themselves to some extent, with just being really over the top with the whole goth overtone, Cirque Soleil weirdness. It's become more of almost sort of just a visual distraction than having really, really top-notch music anymore. But this in the early 2000s, Nightwish was paving the way for this little subgenre to really become a thing for a while.
I gotta say, they're a band that back then it was probably a little leaning too far into glam for me to crumple my cult street cred to admit that I liked. But
that's fair.
Here recently-ish, I saw some live stuff with Flora Jensen singing, and I was pretty blown away by her range. I'm like, God, I got to investigate some of the Nightwish stuff. Is it something I'm going to listen to a lot? No, but the talent that was on display was quite inspiring, for sure. Yeah,
Flora's got a very good voice. The vocalist they had in between, it wasn't that she was bad, but Tarja it's kind of the Blaze Bayley situation all over again. Tarja was a very hard act to follow. The person they'd chosen just wasn't quite the right fit. And so they moved on and found and got hooked up with Flo. And the reaction to her has been much stronger.
Yeah. All right. Well, for me, this is the last really good Morbid Angel album, Gateways to Annihilation. This is a Steve Tucker album, his second for the band. The first one was Formula's Fatal to the Flesh, which to me was fast and weird sounding, typical kind of awkward Morbid Angel. This to me was a slower take on the Morbid Angel sound. And when it first came out, it wasn't Altars, it wasn't Blessed Are the Sick. I had a hard time with it. But as the years went on, man, I come back, I listen to this album still probably more than the other stuff because it's kind of new to me because it's been the one I've listened to the least. But the first couple songs, I mean, just this, again, that slow pulsing, real rhythmic kind of riffs, but they're slow, really heavy, really unique. You know, Trey, he's a kind of a special force when creating albums, riffs. He's just he comes at it from a different dimension. I don't know what it is, but this album is a grower for sure. And if you were kind of on the fence about it, definitely hope you, now that some time has passed, definitely check it out now. I don't know if you guys have heard Trey remixed and mastered their latest album, Kingdom's Disdain.
No, haven't.
That thing was all drums and sounded like absolute garbage. And his remix of it actually sounds like a Morbid Angel album again. I don't know why the hell they went for the mix they did on it, but definitely check it out on their Bandcamp page. But this is 2000.
The Mayhem. It's like Saint Anger disease, or something.
But the newest Morbid Angel was good. I mean, it's fierce, really Morbid Angel death metal. It just, the production was all drums, and it was hard to listen to. Vocals and drums. It was really bad to listen to, which sucks because there sounded like there were some good songs there. You know.
Yeah, there were. I mean, I didn't buy it, but I listened to it. It was decent. You know.
All right.
I don't know. I'm up.
What you got?
Here's one. I mean, this stuff is new to me. This was going on, and I saw some bands kind of adjacent to this, but like I really got into a couple of bands in this like kind of sphere maybe the last couple of years. This is, I don't know if it's the first. It is either the first or second. I'm not sure. Brodequin record from 2000, of course. Instruments of Torture, Knoxville, Tennessee. Brutal death metal.
Yep.
Very, very, very brutal. Very blast driven.
Yep.
Snare sound, almost that kind of ping thing, but for some reason there's something really appealing about the way these guys do it, and their lyrical focus on pretty much everything they did is just centered around medieval torture. Really, really crazy stuff, like overwhelmingly brutal type of shit. Great stuff though. And I don't think it's the guy who played drums on this. I think it's the guy that played drums after this, actually permanently. Not a cool thing at all. But he was, the way he like held himself while he was blasting, he permanently damaged his spine to the point where I think he was having difficulty walking and stuff, which sucks. I mean, that's bad. And I know he did some reunions using like electronic drum pads and stuff like that. I don't think it's the guy who played on this. I think it's the guy that joined afterwards. But regardless, like sort of innovative in the brutality department, not so much in like any kind of just, you know, immediately gratuitous like slam parts or anything like that. Just like incredibly heavy, incredibly fucking fast. Good shit. Brodequin. Instruments of Torture on Unmatched Brutality Records, which I think was their label.
Right on.
Either of you guys familiar? I don't know. I just got into this stuff like
I've heard some. It's good. I don't know if I own any. I confuse them with Cock and Ball Torture, but I think it's Brodequin is the one. I have one of the later CDs. It's good.
Yeah.
Good, fast, crushing, brutal death. Alan.
Okay. All right. This was something that came out in 2000. It was the band's third album. And this was an album I got really captivated with. I bought it blind, had not heard it before. I'm pretty sure it was probably another one that had been reviewed in Maniacs. Sounded interesting. It was just like, okay. And next thing I knew, Daniel over at School Kids in Raleigh had it on the shelf. It was just like, all right, shut up and take more of my money. But yeah, I thought this was a very, very neat, very unique album, and still do to this day. The band carved out a good niche for themselves. Talking about Primordial, Spirit the Earth of Flame. out of Ireland.
Cool band for sure.
Yeah, they very much had their own vibe, their own songwriting style. They didn't really sound like anybody, and nobody ever sounded like them. They had they didn't incorporate like a lot of Irish folk music, but it sort of had the same tones of being a combination of very joyous and boastful and defiant at times, but also very sad, very melancholic. The guy's name was like A.A. Nenthianga. I'm probably mangling that a little bit. But yeah, he did a very good job, conveying these different emotions in the music. And yeah, just a very unique sound. Very, it's a heavy band. They had started out as more of a kind of straightforward black metal project on their first album. And then they quickly drifted away from that by the second album, which was pretty good. They were, you could tell they were trying out a new formula and weren't quite sure what to do with it. But it really came together at this point. And the band had a good run of albums for several years. The last couple, I'm looking at their discography right now. Well, to be fair, even the last couple, have their moments. This is another one that looking over it, I don't know if they've really made a bad album in the past 20 years. They're not a band I go back and listen to as much as I used to.
They've fallen off my radar 100%. I don't know why, because it's all good.
Yeah, they a little bit in my case too, but this was one of those really good moments where you go to the store, you haven't heard it yet, but you got a good feeling, you buy it and you check it out, and it really becomes one of those special albums that's just like, a really amazing listen. I didn't think about like what was my favorite album of the year or anything, but that one would be a very strong contender for my favorite album that came out of 2000. I had played the shit out of that album for years. I like a lot of their others too, but that was always the one I came back to. I thought it captured their sound as well, if not better, than any of the ones that came after it.
All right. Oop, wrong one.
Punky,
I
happy
guess
stuff.
I'm next.
Interesting.
All right. This one is this my favorite band? No, but this is a band. All right, let's go this way. The Swedish black metal sound was very more aggressive, I think, than the Norwegians. A lot faster, more soaring harmonies over blasting beats, and by primordial.
More thrash based.
Yeah, more thrash based. What the hell's the name of this thing? Oh my God, I'm blind. The Heresy of an Age of Reason. These guys are certainly nothing new. They were nothing mind-blowing, but they just wrote really good songs. They're a band I followed from the beginning. I think I'm missing only one of their albums. But, if you're going to put these guys on the same shelf as Marduk, they're going to fit. I mean, it's the Swedish blasting melodic sound. And where Marduk was a little more aggressive and overtly satanic, this was just a little more in the pocket, kind of what was happening during the time and place of Sweden. But the songs are good, really good, soaring, like I said, harmonies, some twin guitar stuff going on, good solos, just good, well-constructed, fast Swedish black metal. I listened to this band's early material quite a bit, and this album was certainly in my player in 2000 for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know that one.
Well, this is another one. I'm sorry. Are you done?
No, I'm done.
Okay. So that I thought I'd segue, just kind of not going in order since we're talking about Swedish bands. This is one that was introduced to me by Ben, Maze of Torment. So for this, I was like 2000. What came out in 2000? And I just went through my Discog stuff and was like, okay, arranged it by year, and I picked this up because Ben talked about it. Brain Smasher, that is. Listened to it a bunch. Listened to it a bunch of times when I got it, and just kind of whatever. I hadn't thought about it in a while, so I was spinning it right before I came on with you fellas, and like this is a really solid album, Death Strike by Maze of Torment, and it kind of reminds me, like I sort of forgot about the era when like Witchery and Swordmaster, there was sort of this beginning of like return to like 80s inspired stuff, but coming from like sort of a black metal kind of way into it. And this is just a really, really good, like catchy, riffy, there's melody involved, but it's also pretty aggressive, kind of black, kind of thrash sort of record. And I'd never heard of them before. It's one of the things about metal YouTube that's so great. You hear about these bands. But yeah, it definitely reminded of me of like listening to Swordmaster and bands like that on comps. So yeah, solid spin through.
Definitely. Another band, you mentioned Witchery. A band that Witchery came out of was a band called Satanic Slaughter. Very much.
Oh yeah.
As Simon would mention, is Norsecore type, fast melodic black metal. With the Witchery kind of maintained that feel a little bit. The catchy Patrick Jensen's riff style was very memorable, unique.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely memorable. Very melodic.
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah. I remember Witchery, making a splash around that time. You're right, Pat. The thing that always sticks out about Witchery in my mind is nothing to do with their music, but they made this big push of trying to get their fans to always do this thing.
The W, yeah.
Doing the W, and their whole explanation for it was it's like giving the horns while also flipping Jesus the finger. And it's just like
it's dangerously close to the shocker.
It's like, geez, come on, guys. I guess that's really, if I was still 15, maybe I would think that was cool, but I'm not. And it's just a little cheesy.
You're in a band called what?
I was in a band called Texas Shocker. That was on all the fly. Yeah, it was, offensive punk time for me.
What got me about Witchery is Necropolis put all their money into that band. The campaign that was behind that band was crazy. The ads, the interviews, they were pushed hard.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had some okay stuff. I like Swordmaster better, I think, but whatever.
Yeah, they were all right, but yeah, they did get overhyped.
All right. I'm up. Okay, people were mentioning it in the chat. You can't get through it without talking about Dead as Dreams by Weakling.
Oh, yeah.
US black metal was going on before this. I mean, you got Krieg, you got Judas Iscariot, you got Profanatica. More of a brutal style, whereas Judas Iscariot was definitely more Norwegian, Scandinavian influenced. Weakling, they took a very atmospheric, unique, dense approach to black metal, and members of Jesus, can't remember the name right now. Sorry, but yep, there's some members very much known in the Cascadian, California realm, and this album alone really inspired Cascadian black metal a lot. After this album, there was a lot of bands creeping up with this really expansive atmospheric style. The riffs were more feeling than they were actual riffs. They weren't like catchy, headbangable riffs. It was just more of an emotional template for the songs to dig in. And this is a lengthy album, but it's very good. These guys were a one and done band. This album came and went and made a splash, and I think as the years gone on is kind of steamrolled into something that people really look back as being quite influential, which I think it is. In terms of US black metal, this is definitely a very influential album. Check it out. Dead as Dreams is going to be probably not cheap to find, unless you're Justin from Vestavon's Blood Box and find it at Goodwill for $1. He found this CD at Goodwill for $1 here recently.
Motherfucker.
You never know.
But hey, we got a copy on Discogs right now for $1,800 Canadian.
Really? Fucking sold.
Hit
me up, 1,800 Canadian. It's yours.
There you go. But no, it's not a cheap album to get. But yeah, good call, Marty, and that's a good description of it. Yeah, I don't see a copy on Discogs cheaper than like 75 euros. Ouch. Not buying that.
It's a lot. All right, Pat.
All right. Weakling wasn't the band that had the Thurston Moore in it, was it? I'm confusing that with somebody else.
No, that was Twilight.
Twilight. Okay. Twilight Weakling. All right. Here's
Amber,
a good one.
the ladies from Amber Asylum were in this band.
Okay.
I believe.
All right.
And one of the guys.
This is a really good.
Go ahead. No, I can't remember the damn name.
Nobody talks about this band, and I don't know why. Vomitory.
Raped in Their Own Blood is a classic.
Revelation.
Oh yeah, yep.
I never really hear anybody discussing Vomitory that much, and they're a really cool band. This is the era of the really heavy, brutal stuff, and I mean, sonically, they come from that in terms of just like their production, drum sound, everything is very, very heavy, almost brick walled, not quite production wise, but they're unabashedly Swedish. They still have that kind of almost kind of punky, like crusty riffing at points. I don't know. Like, I haven't really heard too much stuff that's like along those lines. Like, there's elements of it that almost kind of remind me of Regurgitate, who were like a big thing at the time. And but it still has a certain, like I said, a certain like kind of adherence to that sort of entombed, like kind of more like Discharge influence, like riffing, but plenty of blasts, really, 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 really heavy. I think this was the first one that they did for Metal Blade. I think their previous 2 records got reissued on Metal Blade, Raped in Their Own Blood, and the one before it. But this is great stuff. I mean, I picked this up maybe 3 or 4 years ago and couldn't stop listening to it when I discovered it. Picked up a 7-inch by them first, which I think was like the first thing that they did. And I was just blown away by how heavy it was, but also the fact that it wasn't like heavy in the way that like Suffocation or something like that is heavy in a death metal kind of approach or context.
It's a great band.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I've always assumed they just kind of got lost in the wash a little bit, but the ones I've heard have been very strong. So I think they just get, there's so many bands, nobody knows them all, and that one just has never floated to the top for a lot of folks for some reason.
They haven't put out an album since 2011.
Yeah, they did some more stuff, all kind of along the same lines. Almost like, I feel like they were like a Swedish answer almost to like Exhumed or something like that, like kind of honoring the past but bringing it into a post 2K kind of thing, you know?
They kind of, for me, sit in the same realm as Germany's Deranged. Really dense and nasty.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. Good call with that.
All right. Well, I'm going to step outside of heavy metal circles for a minute.
Dixie Chicks, here it comes.
You got me. But
props to them.
Now, this was one that it's not a heavy metal band whatsoever, but it is a band I think appeals to a lot of heavy metal fans out of more the goth scenes. This was something of a comeback album for the band, and clicked really well. It was highly anticipated. I had some friends that were huge fans of this band, and it ended up being one of their best. The Cure, Blood Flowers. Not a heavy band, of course, but within sort of goth circles and such. Robert Smith, of course, is a legendary. Yeah, and a lot of folks were like, "Oh, there's finally a new Cure album coming out." It was very highly anticipated, and boy, did it deliver. This was one I had gotten into the band just tangentially because I had some friends that would not stop playing Cure albums. One of the guys that I did RPGs with around that time had the most extensive Cure collection I've ever seen. All these, crazy, live shows, bootlegs, and all on CD. This is, Amazon was a thing, but barely a thing back then. So yeah, he had collected all this stuff through underground channels over the years, and was always playing it for folks. And yeah, most folks, of course, know this band for other albums that came out earlier, like Disintegration, Pornography. Mm-hmm. This one's almost as good as those two albums. I would rank this a very, very strong third place in their discography.
Wow.
It hits all the notes just right. It doesn't sound like either of them either. It's very much its own album. It is not an overtly happy album. They went through a period there with all the Friday I'm in Love kind of stuff, where maybe they got a little too, happy and lighthearted. But it's not as dark as Pornography. It's not as atmospheric as Disintegration, but it kind of has elements of all those things, and they're very well balanced throughout this album. I probably haven't played this in 5 years or more, and looking at the tracks, I could probably hum along to every single track on this without even thinking about it. So an excellent selection of songs. And yeah, so it's not metal, but it was one of the big releases of 2000 and one of the really, really good releases of 2000. If you like The Cure and for whatever reason you just didn't pick this up because you thought, oh, it's a later album, it's probably not very good. No, it's worth checking out for sure. It's in the top notches of their catalog, and they have a great catalog with a lot of really strong albums in it.
No, I'd love to have been there at the band meeting when, because the Cure started out as very much a band thing. They had the album covers and. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of shifted towards, hey guys, I got a great idea. I'll be on the cover of the new album again. I can just see the rest of the band going,
talented group, but they were one of those bands that very much came defined by their front man and his visual aesthetic. Just it really. Yeah. He clicked with a lot of people. He inspired characters in a lot of different realms of fiction and stuff. Yeah, his appearance was
Sandman.
Yeah, you beat me to it, Pat. The whole Sandman series are very much the art style for Sandman is Robert Smith. With some Japanese influences in the dress and the garb added into it.
Yep.
I don't know. I love The Cure, but I'm also very picky. Yep. Like there's certain albums of theirs where I'm like, I love these 3 songs and I don't need the rest of this record.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because the first thing I picked up by them was the Standing on the Beach singles collection.
Uh-huh.
I really, really like their 79 through 82 period. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love Head on the Door. I actually kind of like their happier shit more than their bummed stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Disintegration I like, but man,
they did well with the happy.
That record's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people like that. They were good at it. It just I think a lot of folks over time have preferred their darker stuff, but they were good at the happy stuff.
Another couple of really good dark ones by him was Faith and Carnage Visors. Both of those albums are big time downer
for sure.
Albums. Holy shit. And
the Head on the Door is a very dark album that's very, very good, that gets kind of bypassed sometimes unfairly.
Head on the Door
gets lost in the shuffle because they did so many strong ones around that time frame.
Yeah. But yeah, I hadn't really thought of I know that they did plenty after Wish, but that was the one that I really had my attention last, which was of course the Friday I'm in Love record.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, overall, they're a great band.
Mm-hmm.
The best Cure story that I don't know, it's something that popped up on social media was this whole kind of I don't know. I think it's been, of course, wildly exaggerated, but this kind of feud between Robert Smith and Morrissey. And supposedly Robert Smith went up to Morrissey at a party sometime in the early 80s and was like, hey, buddy, how you doing? Or whatever the British equivalent of that is. And playfully jabbed him in the shoulder. And Morrissey apparently started crying, literally crying, and ran away. And I don't know if that's true or not. Probably not, actually. But
Morrissey still can't.
You can just imagine it in
get over it.
Strip. Yeah, I like to think that actually happened. I want to believe. That's a funny thing. Anyway, but I mean, Primary and A Forest, those 2 songs alone are an argument for thank you, The Cure, for existing.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like some of the Smiths did cool material too. Morrissey's always been a strange duck, even back into the late 70s. That guy's always there's always all kinds of weirdness around Morrissey. I don't know his whole biography that well, but even in the
I'm not
late 70s when he was writing about early Sex Pistols gigs and stuff, you could tell he was always very, very off from center, even at that early stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, most of the Smiths records I love. I'm not so much into. I'm kind of the same way about Morrissey that I am about King Diamond, where I'm the stuff he did with the band was great, And then I pick and choose with the solo stuff. Some really good stuff, some stuff that's good, but it's not my thing, you know? So.
Yeah, a lot of truth in that, Mitch. Pornography influenced DSBM.
That's true.
I mean, but you got to give. I mean, The Cure. No one sounds like The Cure. A lot of people try to, but they they can't do it. Can't do it.
There is one band. Actually, give me 1 second, Marty. There's one exception to that.
He's going to go get his Gene Loves Jezebel album right now.
Did they sound like The Cure? I haven't heard them in a long time.
It's the first thing that popped into my mind.
He's going to get his X-Mail Deutschland discography.
No. You're right. But there was one little band, and I think they're from Denmark, if I'm remembering right, called The Essence. And this is dead on Cure worship, like mid 80s, late 80s period Cure worship. And it is excellent. They did about 4 or 5 albums. They've always been a band that's a little hard to find information about. They came, they did their thing, and moved on. This album has like 2 of the albums, crammed onto one. And of course, they culled a song or 2 off of it. But this pairs the albums Ecstasy and Nothing Lasts Forever. I don't know how they did it. I mean, they really must have just sat down and figured out, we're just going to try to sound as much like The Cure as we can. The vocalist is will be maybe a little cleaner. We don't have any of the same striking imagery. But anybody that really likes The Cure should check out some of these Essence albums. They are so
that's wild. I can't even conceptualize like a good Cure. Like they have a different sound on every record. Like Sisters of Mercy are a different story. There was a period when every band on Cleopatra was a Sisters of Mercy clone. Like The Wake, Rosetta Stone, Two Witches, Nosferatu. It was all like some dude doing a shitty ass like
all that clear.
Andrew Eldridge like roar, roar, roar. It's like you're not Rosetta
all that stuff on Cleopatra.
And the Wake were actually pretty decent too, but it was everybody trying to do that Eldritch croon, and what a weird era for music. Anyway, whose turn is it? I have no idea.
Just a heads up on the Essence. I have a buddy a close friend of mine who's a diehard. Cure is his favorite band. I'm gonna pass the Essence on to him. I don't know if he's heard them or not. So
don't know. And again, for some folks, it may be too much like The Cure, or they may be like, well, yeah, it sounds like them, but it's just a copycat. That's okay. I those 2 albums, I've heard all their albums, but Pure, Ecstasy, Nothing Lasts Forever, and there's one with a white cover with just like a vase of flowers on the cover. I think it's the second one. If you like that style and you just don't want to hear a Cure album for some reason, they are very good at it.
Right on.
All right, noted. Knowledge.
So I guess
Sick.
I'm up. Let's go here. We'll save that one for last. I was a big, humongous fan of Bethlehem Suicide album. One of the singers on that album was Marco Kellren, who also did the band Dionysus. This album came out in 2000, right around the same year or so after the Suicide album. And Dionysus was very much a depressive black metal band, mostly a solo project, though he did bring some other people in to help with some things. But this album sounds like the spiritual continuation of Suicide, though it is a little less experimental. So it's like more of the straight up metal parts, but really super depressive. And Marco's sick, just depraved, miserable sounding vocals are bleeding through on this here as well. This is a great album, really super fucking depressing. This is the 3rd or 4th album. I don't know, but all the early stuff is really worth checking out. But this one is, if you like the Bethlehem Suicide album, this is definitely the self-titled Dionysus is definitely where you should go next for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool band that's never gotten enough attention.
No, they just put out an album a couple years ago. It's like kind of a return to form. It's really good.
Which one is that, Marty?
Hold on, I'll tell you. Ode to Acts of Murder, Dystopia, and Suicide. That came out in 2017.
Oh yeah, I missed that one. I haven't heard that
The
one.
Warfare Machines album was actually kind of boring, and actually on Metal Archives it's got a 53% rating. So yeah, other
I think it's a
people.
little. Yeah, I think it's a little underrated. It definitely is a little atypical. It's not what I want to hear Deinonychus do, but it's got some good stuff on it. But it's definitely outside of their normal lane.
Yeah. Patrick.
All right. Well, I've been holding on to this one. This is probably in both of your piles. I've waited long enough. I want to talk about.
Oh,
Lord
dude,
Weird
I didn't know
Slouch.
that came out in
Lord Weird
2000. I would have
Slouch.
been.
I wondered who would pull it. Yep.
That is fucking
Down among the
amazing.
dead men. Down among the dead men. Yeah, like this and Traveler, probably my two favorite.
Oh yeah.
Traveler just got
amazing.
reissued on vinyl.
Ooh,
I know.
I've been spending. Way
I don't
too
even
much
own a real
money.
copy of that. I need to get it because it's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to read the comics that cover art comes from. I mean, it's 2000 AD stuff. It's not the Judge
Alien
Dredd
Legion.
stuff, obviously, but
Alien Legion.
Legion.
I've got the first.
Yeah, I mean,
6 issues. It's great. It was a great series.
What's awesome about this cover is that my Dungeons and Dragons party faced like a big like corpse golem like this, and it might have been actually inspired by this because the DM's cool and knows he's not a huge metalhead or anything, but he's into a lot of cool stuff and listens to on like a civilian level like a lot of the same music we like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, did you know about the Slough thing? Because did you get it from that? Because it's cool. We had to fight one of these in a gorge. But yeah, I mean, for people out there that don't know Slough, like imagine all those snaking dual leads that made early Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy so great, kind of brought into more of a modern production. I mean, I knew a lot of people. I heard about these guys. I learned about it from a lot of people that weren't even like metalheads. Like they were hardcore kids that just like came across this band around the same time that they were discovering Thin Lizzy, like simultaneously. They're like, oh, there's this old band, Thin Lizzy. They kind of influence Iron Maiden and it's awesome. Like you like Sabbath and Zeppelin outside of your normal hardcore stuff. Well, check out Thin Lizzy. Also listen to Slough. They're this new band that sounds like Thin Lizzy.
Mm-hmm.
This is 20 years ago. This is one of their better records. I don't know. I think, was it after this, Alan? They just went to Slough or not? I don't know when the name.
No, it was a couple
albums later.
Not important. A couple albums later,
This album,
but I mean,
so excited, it's so good.
Yeah, I would love to own them on vinyl, but I don't.
Yeah, it's one of those. Down Among the Dead Men is a damn near perfect riff album. Every riff is so good, so catchy. The guitar work is amazing, and they're quirky and strange, but somehow all together it works. They're like early on, man. Their first 4 albums are perfect. They're perfect. And again, another one of those bands that should have been way bigger, but they weren't. People just didn't know about it or didn't catch on to it. I don't know, but I mean, they still keep putting out good stuff. I mean, I don't think they put out a bad record.
Did either of you ever get into Hammers of Misfortune, which I believe that's a related project? I've heard their stuff. I thought it was really good. I just never owned anything by them.
Mm-hmm. I've had at least
that was the band that had a member of Weakling in it. Hammers of Misfortune had a member of Weakling, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's the band I couldn't think of. Thank you, Pat.
Okay. Well, the Wretch was the one from that band that I guess it's almost like, for lack of a better term, like a rock opera kind of thing. Like it's a narrative. And it has like black metal elements with like black metal shrieking, but also a lot of the trad metal that is on Slough stuff. It's a cool listen. I've heard it just like in my friend's car or whatever. And that just got repressed actually too. And I think it's like a 3 LP. It's a really long record, but heard lots of good things. Don't own it though.
Trying to find John Cobbett is the guitar player in this. He was in Hammers of Misfortune as well. Okay. I believe Mike was for a while too, the singer, wasn't he?
I do not know. Hammers was one of those bands I checked out, but never really got heavily into. Some folks really go crazy for that band.
Yeah. The main
Great
guy from
pick.
Slowfeg like moved to. Oh, thank you. He's originally from Pittsburgh and then like moved to the Bay Area, I think, or something like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I know the singer guy, Mike
Scalzi.
Yeah, he's a philosophy professor at some college in California.
Yep. Yeah.
Which seems like it makes perfect sense.
It fits them. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There's always been a parallel drawn with Slothfig to another Bay Area band, Broke His Helm. They had that same very quirky sound to them. Broke His Helm was a little bit more speed metal at times, really off the rails, but really very cool. But yeah, people have always drawn a lot of parallels between them, partly because they're from the same place, but they both had that very quirky sense of songwriting that was really catchy but very unusual.
Yeah, like I've been trying to catch up with all the traditional metal that was happening in the 80s that was like kind of living in the shadow of thrash metal that was kind of keeping it real with, whatever. So I've been like, what boxes I still need to check off that I haven't listened to. Like I've been well into Savage Grace and Liege Lord and stuff like that for years now, but I haven't really listened to Broke His Helm yet. Slaughter, Extrosis, worst. That's why your band never went anywhere. Nobody can pronounce your band name, but them. And Broke His Helm, I listened to their second record in the car when I was on the way to pick up Griff from school. And I was like, the music's great, but this is the weirdest / worst drum sound I have ever heard. Like, you can only hear certain, like the toms, you can't hear at all, barely, but the snare's way too loud. It's really weird. It completely killed the record for me. I haven't listened to the first one yet, but yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like anything else really that I've heard.
Yeah.
So
I remember the first time I heard that album too, that the sound was very off-putting the first time I spun it. It's just like, this is very strange to listen, and then I played it the second time and I instantly fell in love with it.
Okay. Well, I got to give it that second chance then.
Might have to. It's a fun band. They never got much recognition. It just took them too long to release stuff. Their albums were sort of independent releases. They had no distribution. And so it wasn't until way into the 2000s that they got their third album out and actually, had some, got, some, a little bit of attention and hype, long after the fact. But yeah, all three of the albums are cool.
I don't know when they came when. I only have like dubs of a couple of their albums, but Broke His Helm always kind of struck me as very much a product of the 70s. They sounded very 70s hard rock influence to me,
They've got some of that mixed in for sure. It's sped way up most of the time, but they're some folks will draw a little bit of a parallel between them and Manila Road in that sense. That they're these bands that had this 70s influence, but very much build their sound around what was happening in the early and mid 80s.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. But yeah. The only bad thing I can say about that Slothfig record, Pat, is that I like Traveler so much more than all of their other albums that I just never really go back and play a lot of the other albums. Anytime I think I should hear Slothfig, I just always pick Traveler.
It's so good, but
understandable.
The writing was on the wall here. You knew Traveler was coming after this album because this is so well written.
The song Traders and Gunboats on that album is very much a prelude to the Traveler one.
Oh, so good. I'm excited. When we get done, I'm going to listen to that album tonight. All right.
Okay. Something that came out in 2000. This was not a new release. This was a reissue, but it was a sorely needed one and got a lot of folks introduced to this band because their stuff had been a bit of a pain in the ass to find for a long time before that. 2000 was when the Samhain box set came out and got a lot of folks reintroduced to that era of Glenn Danzig's career. So it was, it's got, all the Samhain. Oh, give me a second. I'll get it open. It's got,
that looks like it's in perfect condition too.
It's got, the book with Erie Vaughn with liner notes about his time working with Glenn. you had the little comic book thing with we're not going to show much of this because this will get the NC-17 rating on the podcast, but you've got a VHS, so yeah, it's still the pre-DVD era, but then you've got the whole pretty much the whole discography from Unholy Passion, November Coming Fire has always been my favorite by them, but yeah, they even did the Final Descent album in here with all the different outtakes, so you hear like early demo versions of Twist of Cain and stuff like that. It's just it was a hell of a package, and and it's funny now because now that thing is kind of hard to find, and so once again, the Samhain collection finally got reissued, and it all disappeared, and now people once again it probably needs reissuing again to get folks back into it.
Yeah. So when I was young and stupid, I had that for a while. I had the Misfits box set when it came out, which was a huge game changer. Original Mysterious Guy band.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know anything about them before, definitive liner. It was a big deal. Songs that you couldn't find anywhere, that whole thing. And then the Samhain box set came out, and I was like, cool. I'm glad I have this. And then a few years later, I'm like, a VHS? How lame is a VHS? Who has VCRs anymore? This comic book sucks. It's only like 5 pages. CDs. I'm into vinyl now.
I don't like
get rid of this. And I mean, I've reobtained the rest of all the stuff in it pretty much except for the videos. But I really, really wish I never did that. Because that's a cool thing to have, that Samhain box set. I mean, I absolutely love that fucking band. There are certain days, especially around this time of year, where I'd rather pick up Samhain stuff to play than the Misfits, just because the Misfits are so overplayed in my life. So fucking good. So good.
I can honestly say I've never heard Samhain ever.
Really?
No, I'm looking them up on Spotify right now.
November Coming Fire is the one I would start with if you want to check them out, Marty. It's the most metallic in the catalog, but I mean, it's still not a heavy metal album. It's just got a little tighter sound to it.
Yeah, it's Glenn Danzig kind of
Discogs. It's not on Spotify. That's weird.
I'm not surprised. It's definitely that stuff is definitely on YouTube. I mean, it's Glenn Danzig. You can tell he's been listening to death rock and industrial, weaving it into. There's a lot of redone Misfits songs. They redo "All Hell Breaks Loose," Helloween, a bunch of other. I'm spacing on one or two other ones that they do.
I don't remember.
So like, there's elements of Misfits. It's a good transition between Misfits and Danzig, whereas Danzig's like a rock heavy metal thing. This is more of a death rock kind of deal.
Samhain.
Steve Zing.
Yeah. Samhain really plays
Steve Zing,
the ambiance a lot. Really going for that. The spooky sort of goth, but very dark kind of sound to what Glenn does.
Yeah, haunting. Like that shit for me was a gateway drug into getting into stuff like Bauhaus and Sisters of Mercy later.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying. I kind of got into all that stuff right around that same time that this came out. I was getting more into stuff like Sisters of Mercy and stuff. I was still listening to metal, but around this time I was doing tape trading and CDR trading with a lady who had written for Sentinel Steel magazine a little bit, and she had a huge, vast record collection, and so she'd send me all these weird Swedish '80s album dubs on cassette, but on the back side of it she'd be like, oh, here, you need to hear stuff like New Model Army, and oh, hey, you should check out this here's some early Sisters of Mercy, and lots of even just like electronic stuff, and even like stoner 70s stuff, like early. She loved the first two. Basically, she figured once Michael Schenker joined UFO, she lost interest. She only wanted to hear the first 2 albums. She had really, really cool, very eclectic taste, and got me interested in a lot of different music. So, Natalie, if you're out there, hey, haven't seen you in a while.
Here we go, Pat.
fucking getting my card pulled by Chromie. I do not know who Comsat Angels are.
The name rings a bell, but I don't know anything about it.
I have something to Google now.
All right. I guess I'm up next. Yes.
You're up. Yep. Take it away, Marty.
Before I go there, let's go here. Very much 2000, you started seeing bands like Christian enter the fray, where it was like introducing this turbocharged death metal sound, taking death metal and kicking up the speed. Bands like Angel Corpse, who I really like. Christian live or on albums sounded great. Live, they always sounded like garbage to me, but I still could not let go of the old school sound, and Vader brought it once again with Litany, one of those bands that they had a sound that they cultivated. Their early demos sounded very Slayer-ish, Slayer-esque, and as they went on, I mean, even the Ultimate Incantation, their debut album, doesn't sound like where they landed. I think it was De Profundis and the Sothis EP is where they started to really sound like this. It's turbocharged death metal, but still hanging on to that old school vibe, that old school feel. Super fast, exacting drum work by Doc. I can't remember the guy's last name, who is passed. Rest in peace. The guy was a machine, and it allowed this band to really ramp up the pace, but still not lose sight of incredibly catchy songs. Litany's a great one. The first run of first 4 or 5 Vader albums you really can't go wrong with. Litany was a good one.
Yeah, I've never.
Yeah, I actually pulled that too. Yeah, it's a really good. I was spinning that in the car earlier too while I was driving around, being like, I haven't heard this in a little bit. The drum sound on that is also like kind of overpowering, but like in a good way. Like it's very fucking driving. The intro, the build up within the first couple of minutes is like pretty weird. Like I was expecting it to almost turn into like a techno song or something for a second. But the whole attack of the album overall is like pretty fucking intense.
Oh yeah.
Vader, I don't know their discography nearly as well as I should. I've heard a little bit here and there, but it's one that I should follow up on sometime.
De Profundis is a good place to. That just got reissued too this year. Really good album. There you go. A little comment for you, Alan, from the Chrome ED.
Oh, let's see what we got here.
It's highlighted on the screen. Yep.
Thanks, Kermie. Love you too.
All right. You are next, sir. Salem.
Oh, okay.
Nope. It's Pat's turn.
Yep.
Oh, is it? Okay. Let's see. I got a pile of stuff. Well, since it's been mentioned a little bit and it's a related band to the Black Hand, who I was talking about earlier, this is a really great record. Everything this band did was good. Born Dead Icons. The name of this is Work. This is one of those, like, a good combination of this band and that band, 50-50. But one half of it is a major influence on the other. So it's like more of a 75-25. I don't know. Half of the influence on this is Amoebics, and the other half is Motorhead. It's super driving. It's definitely got from what I remember seeing these guys live a bunch of times, the dude even did the elevated phone, like Lemmy thing a bunch. Sounds like a lot of the like more mid-paced, like early 80s kind of Motorhead material. If you're familiar with Amoebics, who are also very Motorhead influenced, it's got that sort of really bleak, apocalyptic, sort of mid-paced, heavy, reverb-soaked kind of sound to it. Underlying sort of like riffy rock and roll kind of feel. There's a little bit of like Pacific Northwest, like Wipers influence kind of bleeding into everything. Super dreary. Almost like there's like a very industrial backdrop, like a Quebecois sort of roots to this. It's very good. Like everything this band did was great. They did a band after this called Complications that was less on the metallic Crust kind of tip and a little bit more towards the Wipers thing. and also a little bit more influenced by like Dead Moon. Super dreary as well, but a little bit more garagey. Really, really good band.
Cool. I do not know that one.
Oh, sorry. Typing in the comments. There we go. Alan, you're next.
Okay. Well, let's see. Another one that was kind of a big splash in 2000, and it went over, I'd almost say, surprisingly well, given how his previous releases had been going, was Halford came back with Resurrection, an album I used to have, but it's long gone, so we're just going to look at a picture of it.
That record's great.
This is one of those just, this is just a great big chunk of metal. The end. It's got the look, it's got the attitude, it's got the sound, it's got Bobby Jerzombek on drums, which is always a good thing. There's nothing fancy about it. There's nothing flashy about it. It's just here's your brick of metal. Enjoy.
Yep.
And it went over very, very well. I think it might have been Sue Knowles at Maniacs had it picked as like her album of the year for 2000 when y'all did your top 10 lists at the end. Halford, after he had left Priest, the first Fight album went over pretty well. It got some attention, but the second one died a miserable death. That band ran its course in one album flat, and folks were kind of like, well, what's he going to do next? And he came back really strong with that one. It's it's not a spectacular album in terms of it doesn't do anything new. It just does exactly what you want to see Rob Halford do: play heavy metal. The end.
Hey, Alan, Nebulous
I heard that when it came out.
Is he the guitarist on that Halford? I have no idea.
Let me double check. That one's.
Didn't mean to talk over you, Pat. Sorry, we have a slight delay. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's all right. It's a little.
That one on
weird,
guitar
whatever.
has Mike Chalsick and Patrick Lockman as the guitars.
All right. I have not heard any of that Fight stuff or any of the Halford stuff. I guess I need to take some notes. I better do that right now.
The first Fight album is okay. It's a product of its time. It's getting a bit groovy. It's very much so. It's stripped down, but
didn't Fight get kind of Pantera-esque as it went on?
They started pretty Pantera-esque. I mean,
they were in the,
yeah. I mean,
I hate that shit.
Like I am 43, so I'm right in that pocket where I get nostalgic for like, oh, dude, Sacred Reich Independent. Like, why?
Oh, no.
Or like, what's the Exodus record with like the Gonzo artist from like
Force of Habit.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
Force of Habit. I don't like want to listen to stuff all the time, but once in a while I get that itch where I'm like, yeah, drop D tuning and like little bendy riffs and just like damn, yeah. Like, I don't know why. It's something that I grew up with, but like, yeah, Fight is definitely right in that power groove kind of pocket.
Yep.
And it's Rob Halford doing that with class, because everything he does is with class.
Yeah,
but it's certainly very much like that kind of pro-pain, pro-pain, kind of that type of shit.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it, Pat. If Fight had, a vocalist who was, a Phil Anselmo wannabe, just, trying to, sound all, roided up and angry singing that album, I probably wouldn't like the album. But Halford, singing over the top of it, it makes it work fairly well. The second Fight album, it had a funny name, and it felt like it went
a small empty space or something like that.
A small deadly space.
Small deadly space.
Something like that. And it just, I remember when it came out, it was just like, is this even the same band? It just went over like a lead brick. What's Brian saying here?
I'm 43 and totally get the Sacred Right Independent love.
Yeah, man.
And I loved Ignorance and American Way so much. When they got a little more groovy, I was really bummed.
No, I mean, Independent, that whole record, no thank you. But the title track, the single, that one song, and also whatever I can't even remember what the big single was from Testament to Ritual, Electric Crown, maybe? Was that
Electric
the one?
Crown from the Ritual. Yeah.
I love that song.
Mhm.
The rest of the record, I'm good.
Yep.
Same thing. Like every single video that I think it's just because I watched those videos over and over again when I was a kid, and they had like flickering black and white like cinematography and like dudes stomping around in combat boots and shorts. best fashion choice ever.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, that's
that kind
the
of
rest
thing.
of that Ritual album was not
boring.
Yeah, it was not Testament at their finest. That was overall the album was a little disappointing, but Electric Crown's a cool song, and I agree that the opening track on Independent is just, it's got that killer heavy catchy groove to it. So yeah, I was
my lips. I don't care what you say.
independent. But yeah, I had the cassettes. I just played the one song over and over. I played the rest of it like twice. It's just like, nah, I'll just listen to this song. That's all I need.
All right. Who the hell just went?
I think that started with me showing off Halford, so I think it's over to you.
All right. Let's do one more legacy band from the 2000s that came back with another great album. This is a band that has never really faltered for me. Immolation's Close to a World Below. Come on, what's with the font logo shit, man? That was such a Photoshop cop out from back in the day. I mean, come on. I mean, the Immolation logo was never great, but it's iconic, you know, it's an iconic logo. But yeah, you got the very cheap fucking Photoshop shit going on here. But this is a band that, again, never faltered. They've always been Immolation. They sound like Immolation, though, you know, them and Incantation, you know, they could sleep in the same bedroom, maybe not in the same bed, but definitely in the same bedroom.
They have
it's just
the 50s two single, the 50s sitcom two single beds.
Yeah. Or if they're in the same bed, they got one foot on the floor on each side, just so that you got a little division of space in between them there. But I don't know. If it comes down to Incantation or Immolation, I don't know which is my favorite. They're in a similar sphere of creativity and sound. They come from that era. They've been flying the flag since the beginning, which is amazing. And again, they haven't put out a bad record. And this here was a better record than the one before it. I can't remember which one came before it, but super solid.
Failures for Gods.
Yep, Failures for Gods. What came after this? Unholy Cult? I can't remember. It's all kind of a blur back then, but there isn't much to say about this. Ross Dolan's vocals are crushing as always. The guy has never lost his vocal, his prowess, his power, his depth. Amazing bass player, and he's got Crystal Gale hair. But yeah,
he does.
Great band.
Down to his ankles.
Down to his ankles and stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder how many times he's
Love
accidentally shit on his hair or peed on his hair accidentally. That has probably been a thing that's happened at least twice in his life.
I mean, nothing but respect. Like mine got to about my waist, and I was like, "Fuck this! It's getting trapped. It's stuck in everything. This fucking sucks." I have to wear it in a goddamn man bun anyway, so I can just feel like a normal person. At any rate, I grabbed this too. I like it. I love it a lot. Like I feel they nailed it on their Here and After, their second record, like their whole thing. People go on and on about the debut. It's great, but it's certainly like, hey, we really like Morbid Angel a lot, which is fine, you know, and they do it well. But this, I mean, the noisy stuff where like Portal kind of took that from them, where it's like they're really discordant, like weird, like it sounds like they're playing through a dimensional gateway kind of thing. Like Immolation just nails that and makes it catchy somehow. Yeah. And like, I mean, Dolan's vocals, you can make out almost every word he's saying, and he sounds completely demonic. And that's a respectable trait, I think, like in terms of his vocal approach. Yeah, fucking at least everything they did in their initial run was good, but even their last couple of records are really, really great too. I don't really think they have a bad record at all.
No.
Yeah, it's another band where I know a little here and a little there, but I've never put their whole discography together.
And they
So-
could pull it off live.
Yeah, I mean, oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Pick a record, Alan. You're fine. Like any of them. You're good
I've
to
got a
go.
couple. I just, it's the kind of thing when I stumble across them used, I'll pick them up. I just never want to go out and pay full price for them when I see them. So
Their latest Atonement was fucking great.
I remember you
There's some
saying that was a really, really, good one.
interesting songwriting on there. They like took their sound and did some different things here and there. And wow. Atonement, I'm really excited. They got a new one they're working on right now. I can't wait. Atonement's going to be a tough one to follow up, though. Simon, you gotta check out Atonement, man. I mean, Harnessing Ruin is great, but really good. Anyway.
Providence EP is really good. The Providence EP was released. Remember that weird crossover where that is Scion bankrupt, by the way? The car company,
they were putting
Scion,
out
like
enslaved albums and Immolation and other shit too. Car company
and Crust bands too. They
really
put out like a Magruder Grind record. They put out a Scarp record. So
they did
weird.
put on Magruder Grind. That's right.
But yeah, that Providence EP. I think that was like there was a little bit of a lull between the thing that Immolation did before that, if I'm not mistaken. There was Majesty and Ruin. That was a really good record.
Yeah,
might have been after that, I think. But yeah, that EP, I don't own that. That EP is really, really good, really strong for sure.
You know, I don't have that Providence EP. I don't know how the fuck I missed that.
I bet that's worth
Writing it
money
down.
now because it was put out by a now defunct car company.
Great. I'll have a hell of a time getting it. All right,
Dude,
Alan.
that guy is so fired.
Right?
Let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny.
Who greenlit this grindcore project? In 20 years, it'll be the ultimate cult cred. Like, yeah, man, I have a yellow goat and I drive a fucking Scion.
I wonder if
It's like
the
owning a
models of
DeLorean.
Scion that came out that year came with Providence loaded into the CD player, into the MP3 player on the car. And Magruder Grind.
like the whole U2, like, yeah, this is great. It's yours now. You have to listen to it, kind of thing.
It comes
But
with
with
the
a
car.
good band. Sick.
Yep.
I put it in drive and it just started playing Magruder Grind. I don't know what happened. Oh
Yep.
God! All right, is it me now?
Oh, Alan's turn.
All
wait,
right.
it's Alan's. It's Pat's turn.
Is it?
Sorry,
Oh,
my
Okay.
bad. It's you, Pat.
it's all good.
Puff puff pass. Don't fuck up the rotation. Just as a kind of a sort of partner to the Tragedy
Dude,
record I mentioned.
I was at Austin's
Earlier,
last weekend, and he
debut
played
from
me that
Ashes.
album. He played me that album last weekend. I heard that album.
Austin
last
did.
weekend. Yeah,
It's great. It's great.
they're from Kentucky.
Definitely
or
along the same
somewhere down there?
line.
Yep.
What's that?
They're from Kentucky or someplace in the south there.
Members, I think, that ended up in From Ashes What Rise were, and that whole group of people, you know, these like sort of incestuous scenes and all that. The whole bunch of people that went on from His Hero Is Gone, Death Threat, From Ashes Rise, a bunch of them, not all of them, kind of started in Memphis, and then
That's what it was.
all kind of gravitated towards the Pacific Northwest, ended up in Portland. These guys only shared one member with Tragedy, and they no longer do. I can't remember which member it was. I think it was a guitarist or bassist. The Burnett brothers aren't involved in this, and it's a very similar kind of riffing style, you know, like rushed fast, like pretty basic compared to like, you know, technical death metal or something like that, but speedy kind of hardcore riffing with like a lot of melodies layered over it, very apocalyptic and sort of epic in its own way. This was the birth of what a lot of people pejoratively refer to as stadium crust, because like I mentioned earlier, it's very like professional and well done, like crust punk. A lot of it, and again, a lot of it took from a lot of Japanese stuff that had like a metallic and kind of melodic approach, D-beat kind of rhythmic influence and stuff. But yeah, to reiterate, you know, this differs from Tragedy, and I feel like it's a little less doomy. There's like a little less slowness and it's a little bit more melodic, and the singing in it, or growling in it is a little bit more high pitched. I definitely prefer Tragedy, and this is not my favorite from Ashes Rise record. They actually did their third record, Nightmares, which came out on Jade Tree, which was an interesting choice because that label's almost kind of like an emo label. That record is perfect. It's so good. But yeah, you can't go wrong with From Ashes Rise, Tragedy. Severed Head of State was another sort of related, like one member kind of band, I think. World Burns to Death. All these bands kind of like had one guy that was like a roommate with another guy or whatever, and kind of had a similar sound. And all of them were very good.
All right. Alan.
All right. Well, one of my favorite bands released an album in 2000, so I should talk about that. It was not one of their better albums. 2000 saw the release of Running Wild's Victory. Now that right there, that's how you make a shitty looking album cover in the year 2000.
It's not a terrible album, but it's not great either.
Exactly.
I can think of worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the first subpar Running Wild album. I think every album they did before this, which is a long run of albums, is anywhere from above average to amazing. And this was the first time it's kind of like, yeah. There's a lot of problems with this album. They slowed down a lot. The velocity is just not here very much. And Running Wild was always about, speed. The album sounds very flat a lot of the time. The songs don't have. There are some standouts. There are some really good ones. When Time Runs Out, The Guardian. But yeah, I mean, the cover looks like crap. The band pictures, it's just pictures of Ralph wearing marching band uniforms from like 1943 Prussia or some shit. I mean,
what is up with that?
And I'm not kidding. Every damn picture in this booklet is Ralph in a different band uniform. Don't believe me? We're going to do this shit because I'm angry about it. Here are different funny hats in Ralph's collection of funny band major hats. Here he is in his Sunday band uniform. Here he is in his Tuesday band uniform.
Man, with those type pants like that, I don't think if I didn't have something to show in those, I wouldn't be wearing them. And he doesn't have something to show in those.
More from the
look at all your matching little hats.
More from the Ralph hat collection. Tassels were in 2000, and
they're in now, as far as I'm concerned.
And just to make sure, if that wasn't enough hats, here's some more hats. I swear to God, I'm not showing the same pages over and over. We're making our way through the book. That's all that's in the fucking book are pictures of hats and Ralph in band uniforms. The fuck is that? It's a hard album.
Is the music
to like.
Okay?
It's a hard album to like. I do kind of like it.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I'll give it kind of the very, very thumb sideways kind of maybe okay.
So it gets a Slade,
maybe, but and it has problems. There are some very dull songs on here, which Running Wild songs are always, high velocity, very vibrant, super catchy sing-along stuff. And on this album, it's just kind of like, the drum work is not doing them any favors whatsoever at this point. It's very flat. The biggest grief I have with this album is right in the middle of it, track 5. Right where you should be hitting that sweet spot. You've done some big songs. Maybe you backed off the gas a little bit. Now you want to really floor it again. Track 5 is a cover of Revolution by the Beatles.
Ugh.
Why the fuck, Ralph, are you covering Beatles tracks?
Well, at least it wasn't Eleanor Rigby, like Realm or something.
I love that song.
Could they have picked a worse song?
But not
sure.
Metal Man covering it.
This is a band that always prided itself. They never wrote ballads. They don't cover songs. To have that show up right in the middle of the album, it just really shows that they're Ralph's in a completely different headspace with this album. Hat pun intended. Yeah, it's a tough album to love. It's
Yeah.
It's not on par whatsoever with any of the stuff. It's better than some of the albums that came after it, for sure. Yeah, it does have some tunes that I like, but it was a disappointment. And it was funny because Running Wild had made so many great power metal albums in the early and mid 90s when nobody outside of Europe was listening to that stuff. Well, nobody outside of Europe and Japan. And then here it was. Now, power metal was back sort of, front and center. Hammerfall had saved the entire genre and blah, blah, blah. And now, here's one of the premier bands who could have capitalized on that and finally gotten a lot of the attention they'd been missing. And they kind of crap the bed a little bit and start playing these very mid-placed rocking out albums instead of, really they should have picked up this flag and ran forward with it. And they would have been, one of the premier power speed bands of that era.
It's hard
and
to
they
run
weren't.
with a hat.
I get the hat fell down over his eyes. He couldn't see where he was going, and he staggered into Eleanor Rigby Studios or some shit. Next thing you know, he's shaking hands with the walrus as they all cross the street at the same time and get hit by a British bus. I'm angry about it. It should have been better.
I've been saying it for years. The only Beatles song worth covering is what is that song? Why Don't We Do It in the Road? That's the song we cover. Everything else, the fuck out of here.
And get off my Running Wild album. If people like the Beatles, that's cool. They're not for me. Don't get on my Running Wild album. No, go away. Go somewhere else.
What was the one that Coroner did? Was it She's So Heavy or whatever that
She's
song
so heavy.
is?
I Want You. She's so heavy.
They actually did a pretty good job of that. Like I didn't mind that so much, which is kind of surprising.
What a downer close to that album, though.
Anyway, I've said my piece and got my my disappointment and victory out of my system. So
that would be a heavy metallurgy episode. Metal bands covering Beatles songs.
No, not at all.
Kill
no,
me.
It won't. We're going to take all those albums. We're going to put it in a yellow submarine. We're going to run it straight into an uncharted underwater mountain and let it sink.
And then fire all the bands that did it.
We can just sink to the bottom of the South China Sea, and nobody needs to know where it lands. They can find it 100 years from now when they're looking for the remains of the Titanic and all that shit all over again.
This is true. Typo does good Beatles covers.
That's true.
They
also ripped off the Beatles really well.
Yeah, and Sabbath and the Beatles simultaneously. All right,
Marty, get us back on track here.
All right. This is an album by this band that not a lot of people talk about, and it is Enslaved's Martyrdom Beyond the Within.
Nice pick.
This is Enslaved as they were transitioning out of their aggressive selves into. They're starting to hint at more progressive elements on this, but this is still a pretty aggressive, really good scathing album, which this is what I like this band for. When they hit that album Monumention, where they went really proggy, it sounded like it was forced to me. It didn't sound like it was a good fit, which they fixed with Below the Lights. That was a great album. But this is a really good, solid album for the year 2000, a band in Norway that didn't really deviate much from their sound. They're evolving in a very steady trajectory, I think. And I can't remember this guy, but he was on a couple albums, guitar player. They're pretty aggressive still. And this is one I can still dig out and put on and really enjoy. Super early Enslaved sounds very young to me, very immature. It gets better. This is a band that really grew into their shoes nicely over the years. Now they're huge. They're a huge band now. And I can't really say I care much about their new albums. Well, I hear stuff online. I'll watch some live performances, and they're still really great. They're a great band. And they maintain their own sound throughout the years. Even though they experiment within that sound, it still sounds like Enslaved. And this is a good album. Really good, aggressive, good shit.
Yeah, that's a cool pick. That I always like that opening track. What is it? Darker Than Time, Heavier Than Night, something like that is the translation.
Yep.
Yeah, that's always a cool one. Yeah, Enslaved is one of those bands. If I could ever take like a month, go to a desert island and just take the Enslaved albums with me, I have a feeling I would really enjoy them and really get into their catalog. But every time I sit down and try to start working through more of the Enslaved albums, I play, I'll play it once, be like, okay, that was pretty good. And then, ooh, shiny thing. I'm distracted, or something blows up at work, or, the cat vomits on my shoes. I can never give them the attention they need for them to really sink in the way they need to. It just never seems to work out.
I just know Frost and Eld, and those
I
are
love
really
Eld.
good.
That's my favorite Enslaved album. Eld is great. Great album.
Where do they drop off for you, Marty? Is it like, what was the one that came out 10 years? Is it like Vertebrae or whatever?
I like that one. I liked Issa a lot. I liked Rune a lot. Vertebrae was pretty good. And then they put out that Reater album. That album was boring as shit. With the hands, has the hands doing this on the cover. That really boring album.
Yeah.
And then, after that, they put out some stuff. I acquire, a friend will send me a CD. I'm like, oh, this is good. I listen to it twice. It goes on the shelf, and I never spin it, really.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going for Enslaved, it's usually Eld or Below the Lights.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens with me. I'll hear one and be like, that's not bad. But after 2 plays, suddenly it's 5 years later, and I never played it again. I just kind of forgotten about it. I just need to. I have a feeling if I gave them more attention, but that's. My attention is pulled in many directions these days.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Life Eternal Issa is great. That's a great album. That's a huge comeback, return to form for me, for sure. All right, Pat.
All right. Let's talk about this. Vital Remains.
That's a good album.
Dawn of the Apocalypse. Great satanic death metal record. Dave Suzuki, underrated, amazing guitarist.
Yep, and drummer.
Yep. Came on, I think, the record before this. This is the one right before they had Glenn Benton for a little bit. And it's like, I love their really early stuff, like their demo and 7-inch stuff and Let Us Pray, because it's just like awesome, middle of the road. Like, there's fast parts, but a lot of it's kind of mid-paced, heavy, just like straight up old school death metal from America, American Northeastern kind of satanic death metal. But right around this time, the one before this and this one, and then the Glenn Benton stuff, they get really intense, like way faster.
Yeah.
Dave Suzuki has some sort of classical training, I think, with guitar, because he's got these beautiful, brilliant leads. He messes around with acoustic stuff. There's a bunch of the kind of deicide-ish, like dual track stuff going on with the vocals on this, even though Glenn's not on this one yet. Just all around, just a really, really good satanic, brutal death metal record. Really, really good shit. Providence, Rhode Island.
Yep.
Lovecraft country right there. Also, Dave Suzuki's newer band Churchburn is really fucking good. It's kind of a weird amalgamation of like sludge and black metal and some other stuff. It's just they have 2 albums and they're both brilliant.
Writing that down. I have not heard it.
It's on the Armageddon label, the guys from Drop Dead's label.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the LPs are cheap.
Sweet. Okay. Alan.
Okay. This was a death metal band that came back with their 3rd album in 2000, and it was kind of the same and it was kind of different. And it kind of had different reactions. Talking about Nocturnus and Thresholds, which I thought I still had a copy of, but apparently I don't. So back to the phone we go. This album, new lineup. They had a new vocalist. There are elements that still sound like Nocturnus. They still have the keyboards. What's his name? Louis something. Louis. I can't think of his last name. But this album overall, it's a much quieter, more somber album than their first 2. The first 2 are death metal, with these crazy synth and keyboard effects over it, and this kind of sci-fi cosmic horror thing going on that was really good. It's very adventurous on the first 2. This album's a lot quieter. It's not bad at all. The songs, I remember somebody, it may have been Wagner or somebody else at Maniacs.
He loves that album.
Describing it as like, it's almost like they're painting like alien landscapes, that it's really about these, sonoscapes rather than writing normal songs. And I always thought that, was a really good way of putting it with this album. So it's an interesting listen. It is not something I go back and play very often. So it was cool. It was a little different for them. They always had that, very expansive vibe. Even their early albums, they could paint an entire galaxy with their songs. But those songs kept moving along. They always had a very heavy chug to them to keep propelling. And some of these songs don't. Some of these songs really rely on just slowly building the atmospheres, as kind of their main focus, which isn't a bad thing. It was just a different thing. But the band kind of disappeared again after this. It was weird that they came back out of the woodwork. There was definitely some hype paid to them. Got this out. It was on Napalm, I think, and nothing else came. It was kind of strange that there was no follow-up to it. So it kind of stands alone in their discography as that other album that's still kind of cool, but definitely is not doing the same thing that, the Key or Thresholds was doing.
Can't say I've heard that album.
It's an interesting listen. It's a different one.
I recognize the cover art since you flashed it up there, but I completely forgot that ever existed up until fit for at least 15 years.
It was kind of easy to do because it was sort of a flash in the pan thing that it came, it went, and until was it just a year or two ago that finally Mike Browning got his version of Nocturnus back together and put out that new album.
Yeah, which I wasn't that into myself.
People on YouTube were shitting their pants over that record. I bought it, and I was reminded why. I mean, Mike Browning is the problem. People will disagree with me on this. He's very boring vocalist. He's got a very non-dynamic style, and since he's playing drums while playing, he follows the riffs verbatim. There's nothing interesting in his vocal patterns.
Right, and I think
that's that way on the Key. It was that way on the Key. It was that way on the new one. They're a band that I always appreciated their music, but never liked their vocalist.
And I think that's the issue. I'm always impressed by drummers that sing.
Yeah,
and they always have pretty quirky, interesting bands. But sometimes they fall into that, the Deceased stuff where King Fowley was playing drums and singing does not fall into that trap at all.
Nope.
But
the other is Autopsy.
Autopsy doesn't. Exciter doesn't either. I always forget about that. But some other examples I can't think of any right now. But I've noticed that with Nocturnus. I think it works for the Key though, because it's got a very cold, no one in space can hear you scream kind of thing going on.
That's a good point.
That first record, the Key, there's also a weird effect on his vocals or something going on there, some sort of compression. It sounds really spacey and otherworldly.
Yeah.
But on the new record, I was like, dude, you're approaching, I don't know. It kind of seemed like his vocal approach was a really basic, hardcore singer or something, where it's every riff, there's a word that fits perfectly over everything. Wasn't feeling it at all. It was the same year, a couple years ago or whatever, that the new Possessed came out. And I was like, the new Possessed, I really like. I think it's actually quite good. Production, I'm not so into. The new Nocturnus, I'm not into at all. I don't sell a lot of stuff and get rid of it, but I was like, I got to make space. I'm going to sell the new Nocturnus. I don't do that with a lot of shit,
Yeah. I should too, because I'll never listen to it again, probably.
Yeah.
I bought it on record too, which was really dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. I played it a few times. I was like, well, and everything you say is true. I mean, yeah, Mike Brennan's always been a little limiting in his role there. But it's like, this isn't a bad return to form for what they were doing on the first album. But as soon as it went on the shelf, it has not come back off the shelf. No. It's one of those, I look across the shelf, so like, oh yeah, I do have that. They did make that album, didn't they? So it definitely didn't stick well. But I didn't hate it. It just, it got shelved and has been collecting dust for a while now. All right, Marty, that puts it back over to you.
Well, not that this sound ever really went away, but this little supergroup, which, the Scandinavians were huge on supergroups. they brought back the HM-2 sound to the point, and the Entombed Left-Hand Path sound to the point where kind of started a revival, more or less. I think kind of popped up after Breeding Death, the first debut EP by Bloodbath, which has Blackheim from Catatonia, Jonas Rensk on bass from Catatonia, Dan Swano on drums and guitars on this, I think. He might have just been drums on this one. Keyboards by Swano. And Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth on vocals, which back in the day, man, Ackerfeld's vocals were completely untouchable. He's so brutal, so good, and this was a perfect vehicle for him to really shine and not, dip into any clean singing at all. Not that I don't like that, but this was kind of a monster EP that pretty simplistic, color by numbers, sweet death, but really good, really solid. And the one after this, Nightmares Made Flesh with Peter Tagrin singing, is just absolutely crushing. But they put out a really good stretch of albums. They're still putting out stuff. They're still a good band, leading the HM2 revival. It jacked up the price of those pedals exponentially. I bought mine in used at a Guitar Center for $20. Now you go online, they're like $100 and some for a pedal, but everybody wants one. And it basically, that pedal is good for one thing, and it's the style of death metal. It's perfect. But amazing, great stuff. The best brutal vocals ever by Ackerfeld is on the Unblessing the Purity 10-inch that they put out, that single. Songs like Blasting the Virgin Born. Holy shit. He's none more brutal than that guy on that album in particular. But great band. Great album. Kind of set the ball rolling again for the whole thing to come back around. The 80s were alive again. The late 80s were alive again. And it was a good thing.
That's a great record. Brings to mind, like, that was the very beginning of people starting to, I guess, get nostalgic. I remember when that came out and reading an interview, I think with Michael Ackerfeld, and he was just like, yeah, we all just got together and got fucking drunk. And we just were like, yeah, let's do like Left-Hand Path Autopsy kind of shit.
Yep.
I meant to pull it and I didn't, but I should at least mention the Ravenous CD that came out that year, which was like Dan Lilker getting together with some of the dudes from Autopsy
and Killjoy.
That record's also a lot of fun. It's not like completely mind blowing, not reinventing the wheel or whatever genre study kind of shit, but it's cool. There wasn't a lot of people fucking around with that kind of stuff yet. I think really the revival stuff didn't really start happening until 2003, 2004, and didn't really start gaining steam until the late 2000s with the beginning of what came to be OSDM and all that. But yeah, Bloodbath were definitely in there pretty early on.
Mm-hmm. They actually were playing Bloodbath on Liquid Metal while I was driving to work this morning.
What? You always hear all the good shit on there. Every time I turn on, it's Metallica or something really shitty.
Oh, it was followed by like 3 Lamb of God songs, so don't get me wrong. It was an outlier.
All right. Patrick.
Well, speaking of some of the groundwork of what paved the way for Lamb of God, kind of unfortunately, this is a split release from 2000, a band called God Below from the old hometown of Syracuse, New York, with the almighty Ringworm from Cleveland, Ohio. Ringworm were a band that started in like 89 or 90 that were a real weird mix on their first album, The Promise anyway, were a real weird mix of like that tough guyish kind of New York, Cro-Mags, Agnostic Front, even a little bit of Youth of Today in there with Slayer, blast beats aplenty. Like their bassist was really into power violence and grind, and that kind of showed in their music. All the lyrics were super apocalyptic and negative and involved demons and biblical stuff, but as sort of analogies for everyday struggles. They were kind of buddies with Integrity, who were another like, hey, we used to be clean cut straight edge boys into New York hardcore, and now we're fucking around with reading about the church, the final church of Holy Judgment, or whatever it was called, the Process Church. Really weird, like cult influenced hardcore. Basically, there's nothing like The Promise by Ringworm. There's nothing that quite sounds like it. It has a really thin guitar tone. Weirdly metal in a lot of ways. There's trem picking, but then it sounds like Cro-Mags or Youth of Today the next second. It's a really cool listen. They came back with this. That was the split with God Below. God Below was the band from my hometown. Had an ex-Earth Crisis member, Chris Weichman, who played on Firestorm and I think Destroy the Machines. Really riff-heavy, metal-influenced hardcore stuff. Very, very good. Kind of sludgy. There's elements that even reminded me of the Gothenburg stuff a little bit as far as the leads and the melodies. Real intense, like pissed, gruff, hardcore vocals. Not too dissimilar to the roots of metalcore, what was going on with like Damnation AD, Bloodlet, Undertow, Unbroken, that kind of stuff. Like Rollins with a little bit more of a sore throat and a little bit more of a metal kind of vibe, you know, that kind of thing. They on this God Below covers Master of Puppets, note perfect. The only thing different is the vocals. Everything is done to the T, really well. And this is, you know, before Pro Tools and all that. Impressive. You know, it's a 7.5 minute cover or whatever.
Do they do gang vocals for the chorus?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, come on. Ringworm redoes Necropolis, which is a great like blast beat laden, like kind of like Cro-Mags with blast beats kind of song. Again and again, you could see the direction they're going in after they reformed. Ringworm got back together after this and did, I think Birth is Pain was the first one they did when they got back together. They did a couple of records on Victory and then moved over to Relapse eventually. And they kind of slowed it down a little bit. They didn't do the blast beats anymore. They were a huge influence on a lot of stuff that came later, like Hatebreed and all that stuff. Like those bands, for better or worse, wouldn't exist without Ringworm. The guitarist from Ringworm, Frank, actually, I think is still in Hatebreed now. He joined the band later on. So they were the groundwork for that kind of like fusion of that type of hardcore with death metal. So super important release for the time. Two like huge bands that still, I mean, God Below, definitely nobody really outside of my hometown talks about them, which is a shame because they united the scenes. Like there's a lot of people from metal and hardcore shows that would go to the shows, not always get along,
right?
Which was kind of ugly. And then Ringworm, who were again like massively influential on bands that were like way bigger. So big release for me for that year.
Right on.
Very cool.
Alan.
All right. Another one that got a lot of hype, and I kind of forgot about this. And then you said Supergroup a minute ago, Marty. I was like, oh, yeah, let me check. And that was, sure enough, a 2000 release. What happens when you take one of the best German heavy metal, power metal singers and pair them up with one of the better U.S. Heavy metal, power metal guitar players?
All right.
Demons and Wizards.
That's a good album.
I actually am not a big fan of this album.
I like that album.
It's strange. I should like this album a lot. It's these two guys, with both bands kind of at the height of their popularity. Nightfall and Middle Earth had come out the year before, and so had Alive in Athens. Both bands were at their peak. It seemed like a good collaboration for them to work together. The album, the lead single they did off of it, Fiddler in the Green, is an amazing track. Love that song. Really well done. And the rest of the album just always struck me as very middle of the road. It wasn't bad in any way, but it just sounded like, this really does just sound like John Schaefer playing the guitar and Hansi singing over it. And it doesn't really go anywhere. Bad? No, but as a fan of both those bands, a huge fan of both bands at that time, I should have eaten this up. This should have been my album of the year. This should be something I still play all the time. I don't even own a copy of it. I got rid of it ages ago, and I've never wanted to get it back. For me, it was a one song, and that was kind of it album. I was, not that it was bad, I was just always a bit disappointed. It just felt like, well, you guys got together, you wrote some songs, you played them, good for you. But it did not strike a chord with me the way it went over well. A lot of people did like it, and they did at least one or two more albums over the years together, but I don't know.
That has come to an abrupt ending.
You may not be doing another one for a little bit, but it always felt like something was missing from the album. And I don't really know what it was. Obviously, the talent was there, but it just didn't connect. So it was a bigger release in the year 2000, so I figured it was one worth commenting on, even though it's a pretty lukewarm comment at best for me.
For me, of the three albums, that is by far the best, and what sells it is Hansi Kirsch. I mean, his vocals are great, and he really sells a lot of those songs, I think. And again, it sounds like, Blind Guardian singing over Ice Earth songs. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's the one of the three, I go back to that one, because maybe it's because I have the longest connection with it, but it's just a really good power metal album.
Yeah, and that may have been the problem. It may have just been that it does sound too much like it's just Hansi singing on an Iced Earth album, that it didn't have its own identity separate from those two things. It's maybe because I kind of had the same problem with the Savage Circus album when that came out a few years later. It sounded so much like Blind Guardian. It's just like, why isn't this just a Blind Guardian album? You guys didn't do anything to separate you left Blind Guardian and you just made an album that sounds exactly like a Blind Guardian album. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I kind of liked it at first, but it had no identity of its own. Maybe it's kind of the same issue here.
Right on.
A miss, but oh well. Marty, what you got next?
Well, we just hit like 69 viewers a second ago, so cheers to all you folks for sticking with us for 2 hours and 41 minutes.
Very cool.
A lot of you were thinking, wow, this is so refreshing. A heavy metallurgy episode not discussing this band. This is so nice. This is so refreshing. But guess what? You're all fucked, and fuck all y'all.
They did release an album that year.
Helloween, The Dark Ride. This one goes out to Pat and Eric Bauer.
I like Helloween. I just don't like Helloween sewn under my eyelids.
I have never heard this album in its entirety, so Marty, this is all on you.
Okay, well, honestly, when this album came out in 2000, I was so far up the black metal's ass that I couldn't be bothered by anything that had Andy Darris on it, which, obviously I've stated that the years past that has changed drastically, and I've come back to this record, and this is Helloween messing with their sound a bit, which they never really did too much. There's a lot down-tuned heavy guitars on this for songs like Escalation 666. You could tell Simon, oh for the gods, suck it up, Buttercup. Basically, this is them kind of leaning into what was going on in the 2000s, a little heavier, grungier sound, maybe, even though that ship had kind of sailed at that point. But songs like The Departed, The Sun Is Going Down, absolute classic, great Helloween sound. This is a great album, and I've heard a lot of people say that, that Dark Ride was probably the last album they did that was really good. Well, that's not true. And is this a perfect album? It really isn't, but there's a lot of really good songs on here, and I just had to, I laughed when I found that this came out in 2000, because I'm like, you know what? Fuck all y'all. Helloween, The Dark Ride. Check it out.
You can tell it's from 2000 because the logo's embossed.
Yes. It's got a white background on it too. Yep.
Yeah, it's like Y2K Photoshop embossed logo.
So there you go,
Cool.
61 viewers. Enjoy. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. You're up, Pat. Cleanse the air.
All right.
Something
Getting
crusty.
towards the bottom of my pile here. I was actually surprised to see that this came out on Death Vomit, because I was associated this band with more of the like punk side. I mean, you know, back in the day, my friend Mike and I used to say, what's the difference between Power Violence, Grindcore, and Crust? Power Violence, the guys dress like skaters. Grindcore, they look like heshers. Crust, they look like punks. So whatever. But this band was called Dead Bodies Everywhere, which is going to happen the next time somebody mentions fucking Halloween around me.
Oh, look. What's this?
This is a Grindcore. You're fucking dead.
Just happened to be had one handy, you know.
This is a Grindcore band from, I don't even know where. I think the Southwest somewhere. Came out on Death Vomit Records, which is more of a grind, brutal death kind of label, in 2K. And I had this way back when and just repurchased it for like stuff like this kind of niche, like Power Violence grind kind of stuff. Unless it's a big name band like Infest or something, this, especially on CD, is like pennies on the dollar. I was like, oh yeah, Dead Bodies Everywhere. Having trouble speaking. Dead Bodies Everywhere. I remember this band. I'll pick it up for $4. And this is a really, really good record. It's produced very well. It's way more like heavy grindcore than I remember it. I remember it being more like kind of punkish, like Power Violence stuff. There are elements to that, like especially in the brevity department, the length of the songs. It's short, quick songs, but there's a lot of like, here's a random like I Hate God sludge riff for 30 seconds back into blasting. Like there's a lot of that like really dizzying kind of kitchen sink, everything thrown at you really quickly. A lot of not as quite as many songs like as I expected, or as I remembered on this rather. There's like 14 or 15, but usually with the style, it kind of outstays its welcome. You know, there's like 30, 40 songs in a grindcore record. Like I'm all set, you know, give me half that. So yeah, it's good. There's really good songwriting on it. Yeah, quick to the point, but lots of variation, fast, slow, you know, all that kind of stuff. Kind of pig squeals, growls, you know, shouting, everything you could want if you're in a bad mood because people keep talking about Helloween. So I mean, at this point, it's just funny, you know.
I didn't even feel bad. No, I squealed with glee when I saw that it came out 2000.
We have fun here. Yep. It's fun.
Yeah, we do.
Pat, your phone's going to ring at like 4 a.m. tonight. You're going to pick it up, and all you're going to hear on the other end is a little voice going, "Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween."
And I'm just going to be like, "Yo, I want out." Like
the headlines tomorrow will be like, fire breaks out, in Raleigh suburbs as man spontaneously combusts.
Yes.
Yep. All right.
There's a man in jean shorts in Fuquay, Varina, North Carolina, fucking smashing pumpkins left over from Halloween.
He's on top of the local Publix, throwing the leftover pumpkins at people, screaming, "I want out."
He's wearing a crusty gas mask from back in Y2K that he purchased in a drunken fit just to be like his crusty bros.
Exactly.
Wow, we painted quite the picture there, didn't we?
It's
Here we go.
Evocative.
All right.
Yes.
Here we go. 2000 saw the release of Virgin Steel, The House of Atreus, Act 2.
Virgin Steel is becoming Alan's Helloween. I'm just saying, people. I'm just saying.
I did put up a kind of long form Virgin Steel deep dive on the channel recently. But it's gotten a lot of nice feedback. It's one of those bands with a long catalog, and a lot of times people have no idea where to start because they did change their sound over time, and there are some weird albums in their catalog. So yeah, it's gotten a lot of nice feedback from folks saying, "Oh, hey, this is a really nice roadmap. I can kind of figure out which albums to investigate now." But House of Atreus Act 2 is worth pointing out because this is when Virgin Steel got a really good push. They released these two albums on, I think they were Noise or T&T subsidiary, something like that. But, they were actually in circulation. Their albums, for the longest time were very hard to find. They were one of those bands that they were a US band that nobody listened to in the US, so their albums only got released in Europe sometimes, or had really small pressings. But the Atreus albums got a good push. They're pretty cool albums. They, the bottom line is, they're retelling the whole Agamemnon story, and they're doing it over 3 CDs, each one of which, is 45 to 60 some minutes long. So it's a long journey to get there. There's a lot of good songs on those Atreus albums. They're just kind of spread out over a lot of territory. You've got a lot of these little classical interludes, which, is right up to Faye's alley. It's good performances by everyone. It's some of the stronger musicianship, on Virgin Steel albums. It's just a lot of material to get through. The Act 2 is, 2 CDs. Act 1 was a single CD. And yeah, it just makes for a very long listen to get through it all. This was something that, if you take all the really, really top-notch tracks off the albums and splice them together, make the best of the House of Atreus, you've got a killer album to listen to. But trying to sit down and listen to them straight through can be a little tiring sometimes. But it was also the last one they did for 6 years. I thought it was, I don't know what went on in those 6 years with the Virgin Steel camp, but it felt like a missed opportunity because they had gotten onto people's radar. People were impressed with these albums. They were obviously, showcased the band well. But then it was 6 years before Visions of Eden came out. And in that time, you had so many power metal bands pop up. The scene got very saturated. And so by the time Eden came out, most people didn't even notice that it had come out. It was a very overlooked album. So it's a real shame they didn't get something else out as a follow-up. I don't know if there were health issues. They were always kind of, the lineup was always a little bit in flux, but they'd kept albums going on a steady pace up to that. That may be the longest break in their discography is right after Act 2. So it definitely seemed to cost the band momentum, even though they had a really strong album with this one. And that's all I've got to say about Virgin Steel tonight.
We'll be back next week with the Helloween Virgin Steel recap.
I got to say, I've been aware of Virgin Steel for some time, and back when my friends and I were proto hipsters, like in the sense that we were like punk and hardcore dudes that were like, look at this goofy metal band with their silly gauntlets. Like my friend found one of their records and was like, ah ha ha. So I knew who they were at the time. This is around the same time the same guy was like, here's a Thor record that I found. It's funny. Look at this guy, that kind of thing. Here's the the joke band from Canada. We sentenced you to death by guillotine. Yeah, here's the Pile Driver record, that kind of stuff where it was like real, like, oh, we're gonna poke, like, kind of have a giggle at metal. Virgin Steel was one of those bands, and I just always kind of had their name filed away in my brain. And then I got Noble Savage on tape for like a couple of bucks a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that record. It's got some songs that are kind of butt rock on it.
Yep.
But it's got some real good, like, classic heavy metal driving stuff. So I looked into their catalog because I've been more interested. Like, I've been kind of delving into like the first couple of Blind Guardian records, like kind of dipping my toes into, I bought like a Hammerfall best of, just kind of experimenting, first one's free, power metal. just kind of checking it out, and I read some stuff on Metal Archives, and apparently like they started to get way more symphonic around Life Among the Ruins. Is that right? Like they started getting more like
Life Among the Ruins. Noble Savage was their first kind of stab at doing something a little more symphonic, a little more grandiose. But after that, they kind of retreated from that for a couple of albums. They did Age of Consent has some more epic moments, but is very rooted in 80s metal. Life Among the Ruins is more like an 80s hard rock album. I always compare it to Seventh Star from Black Sabbath. That if you listen to Life Among the Ruins expecting like a power metal album, you are not going to be a happy man. But if you listen to it just wanting to hear like something that sounds like it could have been like a Glenn Hughes album, it's got some really good power 80s power ballad kind of work on Life Among the Ruins. It's got some clunkers too.
Yeah, I'm not there yet with that kind of
I
shit.
don't think that's your
Like,
wheelhouse.
I tried
But no,
listening to it,
if
and I
you
was
want
like,
more of the epic stuff, it'd be right after that, like around the Marriage of Heaven and Hell albums would actually be where to jump back on.
Actually,
okay.
Pat, you
All right.
mentioned
All right,
Pile
good to
Driver,
know.
and that's a member of Virgin Steel's side band, as is the death metal band
Yeah,
Exorcist.
as well as
Mm-hmm.
I completely forgot about that. I just bought the repress of The Exorcist of Nightmare Theater too. Yeah, that completely slipped my mind when I was like, "What's that band?" Fucking
Yeah. A lot of those New York bands in the
middle-aged brain
80s,
fart.
they had all kinds of these weird little pseudo joke things on the side. Some of the guys from
Yeah, I can't believe it. Yeah,
Joe Hasselvander had some side projects like that. Jack Starr had some like that. Bands like Phantom Lord and Devil Child and stuff. Yeah, it was a weird little thing that seemed to happen with that scene.
I've been up since 5:30 and I had 2 beers, so I can't remember things now. Yeah, fucking Pile Driver, of course. Duh. Yeah, the Exorcist record's really good though. Like
It's
really,
good.
really good.
Yep.
The Pile
The
Driver
High
album
Roller
was a fun
reissue of it's pretty nice. And I had an original pressing of that, bought it in Boston. Like the guy at the record store was like, "Yeah, it's all right. I think they're Canadian." Blah blah blah. And I remember listening to it and being like, it's kind of like Venom, but like also death metal, but just bad. And like just sold it, and going back and listening to it now, I'm like, oh yeah, like metal can be kind of like death metalish stuff can be kind of sloppy. It's pretty cool. Like this was like well before a lot of like established death metal stuff that they were doing this. Oh well. It's that record that I flipped for probably $7 is worth like at least $150 now. What are you gonna do? I digress.
All right. I'm up next.
I think you're up next.
Well, this is my last one, but doesn't mean you guys have to be done. But I thought I would end this on an album that I don't like from 2000. And this is by an artist who is among one of my favorite artists of all time. And I followed his career very closely in both the bands he's been in. But King Diamond came out with House of God. This was a giant swing and a miss for me. It was more about an interesting story, and the songs just did not rise to the occasion for me. This is a very boring, lackluster production. Maybe the production has more to do with it than the actual music. I don't know. I return to this album every year, so just to see. And it still just does not. And it's long. There's 13 fucking songs on this thing. And the story is interesting, but it just seemed like King, for a little series of albums there, was getting more into the stories, and him and Andy just were not writing the riffs and the songs that shine like their back catalog does. I mean, I like Voodoo, but I don't love Voodoo. I like the Puppet Master, but I don't love the Puppet Master. The Give Me Your Soul, Please is a crap. I have really high hopes for his return. I mean, he hasn't put out an album since his heart surgery and from his bypass, and from what I've seen live, his vocals are back on top. I mean, he's hitting those highs again.
Yeah, big time. He quit smoking. That's a big part.
Yeah, he quit smoking. His vocals are back in top form. But this, to me, I even saw them at a metal fest, Milwaukee Metal Fest. And I love King Diamond. I've never seen King Diamond live, but he played the show. I watched about half of his set and left. It was just on a smaller stage. He was just not, of course, you go to a fest like that, you're doing a lot of drinking, you're doing a lot of walking around, you're seeing a lot of bands.
Yeah, sure.
There could be the best band ever up there playing amazing, and you'll be like, I'm tired. I don't care. I've been 2 days, 3 days of sonic torture. Super loud. I'm drunk. I'm hungover. All of it. But this whole era for King just seems really uninspired, like going through the motions type shit. Ever since he moved to Texas, he started using that studio. I really miss who produced his, like, Fleming Rasmus? No. I can't remember who was recording the shit in Denmark. He recorded at the same studio that Master Puppet was recorded at, I think. So there was like an atmosphere to that early shit, and that the atmosphere and the songs really rose to embrace the concept, that creepy horror, 80s horror vibe that he was laying down. And when he entered a digital studio in Texas, a lot of that was thrown away. The recording techniques, obviously, Pro Tools, digital recording is far easier to do, less screwing around, less, you can cut and paste, all that good shit. But it's just a very dry era for King Diamond for me. And this album is just a turd. I don't know. Maybe someday it's going to click for me. I don't know. But out of the catalog, I'm not a fan of this one. And I like Abigail too. I think there's a lot of great stuff on that album. There's usually in the Graveyard, people talk down about the Graveyard. That is another kind of overlooked classic to me. Is it a classic? Maybe not, but it's overlooked. Often just kind of people turn their nose up at it, but it's a pretty good album. This is not.
I don't think I've ever heard that one. I think I completely bypassed that album because kind of like you, I'd agree with your take on that era of King Diamond, Marty, that it just, there wasn't a lot to really hold your attention around there. Graveyard and Voodoo are okay. I didn't mind them. They certainly weren't on par with, the earlier albums. And looking at it, I don't think I ever heard that album. I know I got Abigail 2 when it came out, and I didn't like it when it was released.
There's some really good songs on the album. Spirits or Flames, I don't know. There's a couple really good ones on there.
It's one I should revisit, but I know when I got it, I played it a few times. It just, I was not into it at all. And so I never never backtracked and heard that one. And that was around that time, that also just, I kind of was just like, I don't think I need to put a whole lot of effort into tracking down these King Diamond albums anymore. They seem to be kind of heading in the wrong direction by that point, for me personally. Because I probably missed at least one other in there along the way.
Sorry, I'm typing on the oop. Yeah. All right. Patrick. You're digging for gold.
I just saw something in chat that reminded me. I wanted to pull it. I don't know if I can get to it real quick or not. But give me.
While you're digging, I'm gonna go potty. I'll be right back.
Good call. I've had to pee a bunch. A bladder the size of a penny. Let me see. I think I have it on CD.
Oh, yeah. You got it, Pat? Or if you need me, I'm just looking at the comments. Yeah, Baloney, you mentioned Supernatural Addiction. That was a very good album. In 2000, there were a lot of folks that were really. That was one that got talked a lot on some of those message forums we were talking about at the beginning of the show tonight, like Lapland Metal and Metal Maniacs. Yeah, folks were very excited to see the new Deceased album because Fearless Undead Machines, had gone over really strong. So that was cool. Someone's mentioning Spider's Lullaby. Spider's Lullaby had some cool songs on it, as I recall. Yep, there it is, Pat. Yep.
I meant to pull. I have this on vinyl somewhere. I might have misfiled it. I was just looking for it. Great, probably the best, the strongest Deceased record in my. Although Ghostly White, that recent one, really really good. But I think on this, like King and Co, like really nailed that haunting kind of thing. Really like perfectly implemented those like classic heavy metal influences in with death metal. My personal favorite is that 13 Frightened Souls EP. It just rips so hard. I like most of their records, but this is like there's not really a minute wasted on this. Like everything's super just dense and well written. It's just a really fucking good death metal record. And there's some Relapse tour that was, and Relapse was weird at the time because you had traditionalists like Exhumed and Deceased, but you also had like Origin and I don't know, like Mastodon. It was going in different directions at the time. I feel like there's the Contamination tour that Deceased was on. I want to say Origin and Exhumed and like one or two others. I could probably Google it. Not going to do that right now. But I remember seeing Deceased and seeing like a dudes in like denim vests, which is something you didn't see 20 years ago, like heroin milling, and just like it was just this really cryptic but like kind of thrashy death metal vibe, and like loving it. Everybody I went with was like, that was lame, I don't know what you're talking about. And me being like, you guys are idiots. Not just because they're not playing like the most technical shit at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, like they just blew everybody else off the stage, I thought. And they played, I think Origin was on that tour, and they're wicked, like, you know, techie and, you know, like brutal and everything. The band's really good, like they can play their asses off. But Deceased at the time just completely owned my ass. They were great. And then my old band got to open for them in 2010, I want to say, in a big like loft space in Alston, in like the real student area of Boston. And at that point, King was just singing, and they were fucking great then too. It was a really, really good gig. Always
Great band.
Good live. Both those times I saw them. And overall, I think this is one of their strongest records. But like I said, Marty, while you were peeing, Ghostly White, that recent record's really, really good too. But
it's really good.
I don't think they've had a bad record or anything.
They haven't.
Yeah, they were very, very tight right around that Supernatural Addiction era. They're really, really phoned in on what they were doing quite well. I like Fearless Undead Machines probably a little bit more, but that album,
also
that album, sometimes does get a little bit buried by the weight of the big story that's going on. And Supernatural Addiction is free of that, so they're able to focus on the individual songs a lot better. So there's definitely a case to be made for that one being better than Fearless.
Yeah, I mean, Fearless is definitely nothing to sneeze at. It's very close for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whole era with Mike Smith and Mark Adams on the guitar attack was just those guys were just really, really strong together.
Beasts. Yep. All right, Alan.
I've got just a couple of quick ones I'll wrap up with here. Nothing I was going to discuss for very long. Let's see. 2000, and a couple of these are not favorites, but they're ones that deserve mention since we're talking about the year. 2000 was the year where In Flames really started to lose the metal crowd with this album. Mm-hmm. Some folks were already getting a little antsy with Colony before this. I liked Colony a lot. I thought that was still a really cool album. I had no problems with it. The first half of the album in particular I liked. This one, I don't know. This one felt rushed. It felt like they were, starting to head in a direction that, a lot of their fan base up to that point wasn't going to be interested in following for too much longer. So it wasn't a terrible album, but it was the first album I really felt like, I can do without this. I have all the albums before this, and I still will play them routinely, but after that, nothing. Kind of similar. Pentagram put out an album that year, and of course this is one of my favorite bands of all time, but Sub-Basement is not a great album. It's got an awkward collection of songs. This is where Bobby was always wanting to cram a lot of older songs onto the new albums and revamp them, and some of the ones he chose for this album they weren't the strongest songs to begin with. And when you take a subpar 70s hard rock song and you try to rewrite it into, an early 2000s doom metal crusher, you're asking a lot sometimes. The production on this one, it's very, very heavy to the point of almost being, I don't know, they almost overdo it a little bit where it doesn't quite sound great. It's got a few good tracks on it, but it's not the best Pentagram album in the discography. And because Marty mentioned it earlier, Fate's Warning did have an album in 2000, Disconnected, which I just got this one. When it came out, I just took a pass on it. I kind of decided this was going to be, I've liked Fate's Warning, most of their stuff up to this point, but the one before this was Pleasant Shade of Grey. It's one of those one-song, 48-minute long albums, which they play very well on it. I saw them on that tour. I saw them play it start to finish. It's good, but man, you got to be in the right frame of mind to want to sit and listen to something like that all the way through. And then, this one with Pat and that girl featured on the cover from their New Year's Eve that night. It was just like, I don't know. The reviews of it definitely were saying that the band was going in a different direction, and like you said, Marty, they really were going for the quieter, more subdued side of progressive metal on this, and so I just took a pass. But I found it recently for a few bucks used, and figured, I'll give it a chance.
You froze.
It's a great way to freeze, though.
And that's going to be the end of my stack.
There you go.
All right. Well, I'm out. So, Pat, you're back.
All right. I'll just wrap it up with a couple of quick mentions. There are a few things that like I said, I looked through I have my CDs all chronicled in Discogs, not my LPs yet. Who knows when that'll happen. So I just sorted them out by year and then forgot about a bunch of ones. That Deceased was one of them. I meant to pull that. Couple of honorables, we'll say. This Wormwood record. This is a doom sludge hardcore band from the Pacific Northwest. Requiescat. I think that's how that's pronounced. That's Latin, I believe. Very much like third, fourth record kind of Neurosis influence, like Souls at Zero-ish kind of era, when Neurosis started getting more like psychedelic and kind of dissonant, but not quite as crazy as they were later on. Kind of like that. Counterblast, if you happen to know them. Christ Driver, even a little bit. Very, very Pacific Northwest kind of, kind of sonically overwhelming doom stuff. Cool. Still kind of crusty in the vocal, kind of shrieky, shreddy throat kind of department. Not from the year, but a compilation of everything they'd done up to that point as far as like demos and B-sides. The Life of Agony 89 through 99 comp came out in 2000. An interesting kind of overview of this band that had a lot of different sounds in a small decade-long period. I particularly like the demo stuff where they sound like a mix of breakdown and sheer terror. It's really hard, metallic NYHC stuff. And then as time goes on, Mina Caputo develops the vocals into more of that sort of croon that Life of Agony was known for, towards the end where there's Led Zeppelin and Bob Marley covers and stuff like that, into almost sort of a grunge thing. I'm a big fan of River Runs Red. I like Ugly Okay, at least half the album, and this kind of has a little bit of everything from that. And then just a couple more is all I pulled real quick. Third album from Disassociate. This is a long running. They're still playing. I saw them with Negative Approach, I Hate God, and Sheer Terror. It was one of the last shows I saw before the pandemic. People kind of label them as a crust band, but they're way more of a weird grind band with a bunch of noise and industrial elements. Very heavy, they're very talented. They can play their ass off. They played a lot with death metal bands in the 90s. They were kind of associated with that whole squat scene, C-Squat, and a lot of the illegal kind of under the radar gigs that happened in New York City in the late 80s and in the 90s, but really crushing grindcore stuff. And you could tell they like to smoke weed because there's a lot of weird directions their music goes in. Kind of like a lot of West Coast bands. They sort of have this sort of graffiti aesthetic on this record. I don't know who did the artwork, but it looks like some kind of crazy Ralph Bakshi shit. So I appreciate that.
It's cool though. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Really cool, font on the back and stuff. This is actually probably their most cohesive record. It's the least trippy, but they definitely experimented with a lot of weird noise stuff kind of in between the songs, almost kind of tape loop shit, but it's basically grind. Great band. Great band. And also, and on top of all that, they somehow weave in weird super punk anthemic oi choruses somehow. Really interesting shit. And then last but not least, thrown out there, Crude, which is a Japanese band, and this is Attitude that came out in 2000. It says right there, OO. They had another album that clearly labeled that it came out in 99, and then maybe one for another year. Just Japanese, doing their own thing. kind of stuff. Clearly, they like anarchy, which is a lack of centralized government. This I want to mention because this band influenced Tragedy a lot, and From Ashes Rise and all those bands I talked about earlier, with the like super harsh and overwhelming and triumphant driving kind of musical style, but also very melodic and catchy. I don't really think Tragedy or From Ashes Rise would sound the way they do without Crude as an influence, and I don't think they really get enough credit that way. So throwing that out there. This is cheap as hell. Like I was like, oh yeah, Crude. I got to pick up some Crude when I went like on a bit of a Japanese hardcore jag, and this was like $10 on Discogs. So want to check it out? It's cheap, or at least pull it up on YouTube if you're curious. If you like Tragedy. That's it.
Well, sweet, gentlemen. I think we offered up a pretty diverse cross section of releases for Y2K.
I don't know. Nobody picked Hybrid Theory or The Sickness. Both 2000 releases.
Damn it. I forgot.
When did Avril... I forgot Avril Lavigne. Like, that was like around 2000, wasn't it?
Yep. But I appreciate you both. Thank you so much for hanging. And everybody in the chat, you all rule. And the 58 people that are still watching, you all rule. Get in the chat. Don't be wallflowers. Contribute. Get in there.
Yep.
If you're not subscribed to any of these fine gentlemen's channels, you've got Ground Zero Salem. Go there, subscribe. Let's Talk Metal, subscribe. And if you're not subscribed to Marty Worm, please do so. Now, I do want to end, before I end this, it just started. Grown Man Record Night just started about 20 minutes ago. And it is featuring live in the studio tonight, our friends, Aaron the Metal Theologian and Eric Bauer are live on Grown Man Record Night. So
fun.
Definitely migrate on over there and see what kind of shenanigans
those
guys are.
I gotta watch that shit.
But
like,
anybody else have anything to add?
I think I've said
nope.
enough.
That's it. Thanks for watching.
Chat's not happy with my last comment, so we'll just leave it at that.
Awesome. Well, you all rule. Thank you so much, and we'll be back next week. Next week is planned, isn't it?
Yes, we have a guest all lined up for next week.
Sweet. We got some other guests coming, of course, and I know Mr. Fowley will be coming back. We'll be covering the Metal Blade catalog, which will be a lot of fun. I don't know when that's happening yet, but we got some other people waiting in the wings. It's going to be a hoot. Good time will be had by all.
Indeed.
Nice.
But thank you, folks.
Right
We're
on.
bailing out, going over to Grown Man Record Night. Everybody have a good night.
Everybody take care.
Take care.